morning. The State of Nevada Board of Agriculture is now on record. We'd like to have everybody please rise, and we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Grady, would you lead us today?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And for the record, the date today is March 26, 2013, and the gavel did go down at 9 o'clock a.m. A couple quick things today. We'd like to please remind everybody that if you are speaking, make sure you please state your name for the record. We'll now take roll call. We'll go ahead and go around the table. I'll start with myself. I'm David Sticks Jr., Chairman of the Board.
Paul Anderson, Petroleum Products, Washoe County.
Jim Snyder, Lyon County, row crops.
Charlie Frey, Churchill County, crops.
Alan Perazzo, Churchill County, representing dairies.
Grady Jones, Pest Control, representing Clark County, sir.
And in the ALCO office, who do we have today?
Hank Vogler, sheep.
Lloyd Spratling, livestock.
And do we have anybody in the Vegas office? No, but I did receive a call from Paul No, and we wish his wife the best today. She had emergency surgery of some kind. So we wish them the best, and I hope everything's good. So we'll go ahead real quick and...
Tim, their arena is...
Oh, Tim, okay. All right, I was looking at the names, and... Okay, so Tim's absent, all right. We'll go ahead and go around the room here in the Reno office and have everybody introduce themselves. And I'm sorry, I'm with livestock, and I'm from Fernley, Lyon County, so I did say that. But we'll go ahead and introduce staff, and we'll go around the room and let everybody introduce themselves, and real quick. So,
Jim Barbie, Director.
Jay Ludlow, chemist.
Dennis Belcourt, Deputy Attorney General.
Peter Kruger, Nevada Petroleum Marketers.
Sheila Schweidel, Alliance with Wild Horse Advocates.
Beverly Siegel.
thank you, Beverly. Yes, ma'am?
Jean Elizabeth, Animal Rights Advocate.
Susan Noble, myself.
Amy Davey, Personnel Officer, Division of Human Resource Management.
Kathleen Kirkland, Agency for Services. Dan Reeser, Hidden Valley Wild Horse Protection Fund.
Mary Murphy, Hidden Valley Wild Horse.
Shirley Vittorino, Hidden Valley Wild Horse Protection Fund.
Joe Vittorino, Hidden Valley Wild Horse Protection Fund.
Karen Farley, myself.
Norma Davidson, South with Wild Horse Protection.
Sherry Wendell, Hidden Valley Wild Horse Protection Fund. Betsy Brownfield, Hidden Valley.
Dorothy Nyland, Wild Horse Preservation Work.
Mary Ann Olsner, Hidden Valley Wild Horse Advocate.
Jenny Hudson, Agency HR Services.
Great, thank you. And we have Connie.
Sorry I'm late.
That's all right.
Legislature, Connie Valley, Department of Ag, temporary assistant to the director.
Okay. Did you emphasize that temporary?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Supposed to be retired.
Keep pulling her back.
Good. Hank, Boyd, is there anybody there with you other than you two folks?
We're here alone, home alone.
That's scary.
We even showered.
Well, we'll see how long it goes today. When I see you two separate, we know it's time to quit. Okay, and still nobody in Vegas. All right. Well, let's get underway here. Board item C on our agenda is to approve the December 12, 2012 board meeting minutes. Did everybody get a chance to take a peek at those? And anybody see any problems? Or if there were none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the minutes as written.
Charlie Fay for the approval.
Second.
Second by Grady Jones. Is there any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously.
I'm here.
It's good to have your lovely face here.
From my house, believe it or not. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, nice to be here.
Ramona Morrison's here, so we're glad to have Ramona. All right, that takes care of the minutes. And we'll go to item number 3, excuse me, wow. Item 2, thank you, Counselor. Item 2 is public input. This is an item for folks to talk to the board about an item that's not on the agenda. We're going to go ahead as last time. We went ahead and limited it. Can somebody help me to make it fair? What did we do last time? Was it 3?
3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes. We're going to go do 3 minutes and go ahead and open it up. So, any of you folks would like to speak to us? Peter?
You all can hear me from here, I'm sure. I'm Peter Kruger, and as kind of a casual observer of this process, I'd just like to say for the public and for the board members who weren't able to be at the Ag Day at the legislature, your department did an incredible job. They put on a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner, which I don't think has ever been tried before. Had great participation by legislators and I think some public. The displays, not only within the department, but from the ag industry were incredible. And I just wanted to commend this department and Director Barbie. I've been watching this process. I said to Mr. Anderson that there isn't probably a person, well, I take that back, Ramona came in, that remembers the name Tom Ballou. And he was the first director when I showed up here. And I just wanted to say this department is doing an incredible job, and everybody, you as directors and the public ought to be really, really proud. The second thing is the website is incredible. That is another plus for not only the public, but for those of us that interact with the department. And one last thing I'll just say is I lobby also on behalf of the Northern Nevada Development Authority, NNDA. And we have a great cottage food industry bill that the department's been very supportive, and if you want more information, Director Barbie can tell you, but it's on its way to move and really help entrepreneurship in rural Nevada that will help men and women who have an idea for a food product, be able to bring it to market in a way that will not harm or jeopardize food safety, but yet will the big deal is they don't have to spend money on a commercial kitchen right at the get-go. And so, anyway, thank you, Chairman. I'm proud to be a casual observer of this process. The department has come a long, long way. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, who would like to speak next?
My name is Shannon Windle. I'm from the Hidden Valley Wild Horse Protection Fund here in Reno. First, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Director Barbie and the Governor's Office for working with the American Wild Horse Preservation Campaign and the ASPCA to generate the cooperative agreement allowing advocates to purchase Virginia range horses directly from the NDOA, bypassing the unnecessary and costly step of going through the livestock auction. We are encouraged by this first step towards a positive working relationship with the department. We ask the Board of Directors of the Department of Agriculture to support and encourage your director to continue to work with the American Wild Horse Preservation Campaign and immediately implement the second cooperative agreement for on-the-range control of our Virginia range wild horses. The focus of the second cooperative agreement needs to be the employment of methods to keep the horses out of urban areas, reduce public safety concerns, and maintain herd health, resulting in raised awareness and educational opportunities for the public. Specific controlling aspects should be taken into consideration are implementation of humane fertility control programs integrated with a supplemental diversionary feeding program, relocation of horses settling into urban developments, to designated areas on the range identified as capable of sustaining an increase in population, train volunteers to safely move horses out of neighborhoods and back up into the hills, and work with property owners, developers, businesses, law enforcement, and government agencies to mitigate public safety concerns before they develop into problems. The objective of implementing the second cooperative agreement should be to accomplish all of the above at little to no cost to the Nevada taxpayer, and to reduce the amount of department resources spent on wild horse issues, freeing up valuable time needed to accomplish the department's goals and objectives. Again, we encourage your support for the immediate signing and implementation of a second cooperative agreement between the department and the American Wild Horse Preservation Campaign. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. What was the group you were with again?
Hidden Valley Wild Horse Protection Fund.
How many folks are here with that group today? Very good. I just as a simple observer, I don't see very much that you guys. That was a very good presentation. I did forget to mention, as I did last time, we should please try to encourage that you funnel your voices and your concerns about this through one person. That was a very good statement. So I don't encourage that. I don't know how anybody could top that, but if you're welcome to, I'll be the judge of that if you top it. So you may get some criticism. Who's next?
My name is Dana Reeser. I also work with the Hidden Valley Group, and I'd like to add that, again, our thanks for the cooperative agreement that started. What we would like to do, and what we are doing to help out with the problem with the horses in the neighborhoods, is start a Do Not Feed campaign of public education. And to that end, we've created, this is just a sample printed off my computer, it's not very good, but we've created this campaign, Wild and Free, Don't Feed Me. And on the back of this would be a door hanger, or what they call a rat card, which is like a door hanger without a hole in it. And on the back, there's a whole list of reasons, very simple, explaining why it's not good to feed the horses. First, it's illegal. And second, it's not good for them. It draws them into neighborhoods where there's complaints. It draws them across highways and roads where they can hit, things like that. It's an education campaign. We also have a trifold brochure. I wasn't able to bring these today because they're on order. They should be here in time for the home show. We will have a booth there, and we'll be giving information to the public on this issue. We will be going door to door, putting out the door hangers, and I'm hoping that anyone that's out walking the neighborhoods or up in the hills will carry some rat cards in their pocket so they can pull one out and hand it to anyone that they see feeding the horses, because we need to stop getting the horses down into areas where they're causing problems, and this is one way that we hope we can help.
Thank you.
Sheila Schweidel, Alliance of Wild Horse Advocates, and I probably can't top Shannon, but I'm here representing an alliance group which includes local groups and groups from out of the area, including Return to Freedom, LRTC, Let 'em Run, and other groups. And we would just like to second the fact that we really appreciate Director Barbie working with American Wild Horse Preservation Campaign to enact this agreement. It takes a lot of heat off of everybody, takes money from wasteful money that the program might spend, that the state might spend, and
Hang
put
on
it
one
on our
second.
backs.
Hang on 1 second. I don't mean to. I'm sorry. Sometimes I need to have that written in front of me, but if you have a cell phone, please turn it into silent mode or turn it off.
I'm going to wait until it stops ringing and not pull it out.
Well, nice try, but I knew it was you.
And
thank you.
Okay, and would also like to express our desire that a secondary agreement, cooperative agreement, be enacted to help with the control of the wild horses. That issue isn't going to go away. You know, we don't have BLM to round up horses and, store them. And so we do need some type of active control, and we understand that the state doesn't really have the funds right now to do it. But if we can all work together to figure out how to work, together and control the herds up there in the highlands and throughout the whole area, I think it'll just be a win-win for everybody. So thank you, and that's it.
Thank you.
I have handouts, just look for it.
Okay.
I'll get more, but they're color copies and they're quite dear. Hi, my name's Terry Farley, and I'm just representing myself and the horses right now. Again, thank you so much, Director Barbie, for the cooperative agreement and the work you did on it. I know it wasn't simple. Last time I talked with you, I mentioned that I thought that wild horses should be home on the range because they were a golden goose for tourism. So I'm going to talk money very briefly. I'm only going to draw your attention to a couple of items on this survey because I assume you all can read. So this is a survey that I did. It's only up for 3 days on Facebook and Twitter, so it should have a mixed bag of respondents. I got 167 responses, again, small sample, but in 3 days I thought that was pretty good. And you can see my questions, you can see the responses. If you look at the back of the first page, the second to the last item, I think what I'm interested in most, my grandfather was a rancher/farmer from Texas, and he was always looking for extra ways to make money because he wasn't making a lot of money. So what I'm looking at is things that might benefit independent ranchers, farmers, who aren't big corporate ranchers. And if you look at, in basically the rural counties, other businesses as well as ranchers. One of the highest responses to how would you like to see wild horses in Nevada was to go with a cowboy, cowgirl guide from a real working ranch. What I see that as is something that would take very, very, very small investment, and it could be, people would probably pay $200 to go out on the range and ride around. The next page, again, the last item. If I were on vacation, we're given a choice to have any of these resources, I'd pick. Okay, and they could pick as many as they wanted. One of the things that they really wanted was a print guide to restaurants, motels, ranch lodging, entertainment near wild horse ranges. Again, that could be an economic spike for rural counties. On the very back, last thing, I asked about age. And what turned out that I thought was really good is that if you add up everybody under 40 and everybody over 40.
You're over your 3 minutes, ma'am.
Okay. We can grow the market. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And this was responded to by 14 states and 5 other countries.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dorothy Nyland with the Wild Horse Preservation League, and which is also with Wild Horse Alliance and all these other folks here. And I just want to repeat a thank you to Director Barbie for working out this first agreement, and we want to encourage the follow-up second agreement as soon as we can. I don't feel like I can beat anyone who's spoken before me here, so I'm just going to keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, my name is Kelly Hyatt, and Again, thank you, Director Barbie, and we do hope that we can get these other agreements started as soon as possible in the interest of public safety. My main concerns are Southeast Connector, the Alexander Lake Road area, and this, which is the end of South Meadows Parkway. On the tourism aspect of it, if there could be a way, this is where a lot of horses hang out. This is the road, it's gonna come through here. I envision a wild horse sanctuary with viewing platforms. People can come, they can see the horses, they can't bother the horses. More importantly, people cannot get out here to feed the horses. We have photos of people that are letting their children run around and give wild horses carrots. It's very dangerous out there because people can get out there. Hopefully when the connector's there, that won't happen. This area here is Hidden Valley coming across to the gun range. This is the road, and this is the area I'm talking about, which is the Butler Ranch that comes through here. There is already apparently going to be a really nice public walking trail that'll run pretty much from South Meadows Parkway to the river. That's awesome. That could be incorporated into the wild horse viewing area as well. This is the end of South Meadows Parkway. This is what it looks like. People park right here every day, all day long, and sit here and watch the horses. You can get back here, but you have to drive a long way. Currently, right now, this is looking from South Meadows Parkway to Alexander Lake Road area. This is where the road's going to come through. Right here at this intersection, that is going to be a very bad place unless there is a big bridge or whatever to keep the horses out of there, because they do hang out around here. There are already walking trails and paths that are built, I think by Loretto the builder, I'm not sure, that run along the system, standing right there at that same spot, looking that way towards the gun range. Walking trails are there, all we need is fences. This is what the meadow used to look like. This is what people are going to come see. And believe me, they are going to come see it. I'm 51 years old. When I was 11, I used to send money to Wild Horse Annie. I didn't know that Wild Horse Annie is from the Virginia range. These horses are a legacy, and we need to protect them. And thank you again for everything you've done. Please continue working with us. We are ready, willing, able to do it. We have the money, we have the people, and we have the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
My name is Marianne Olsner, and I am a wild horse advocate with Shannon Wendell with the Hidden Valley Group. And I just like to expand on what's been said with a little different. I attended the Chamber of Commerce, the Directions 2013, where Governor Sandoval was the keynote speaker, and he emphasized how he wants to expand tourism to the rural counties. Now, if our governor is willing to do this, I think it puts an expectation on the Board of Agriculture and the BLM to cooperate in making this possible. And I agree that there are so many people across many states. I was just in the Midwest in Indianapolis this past week, and I can tell you that people there are adamant about saving the wild horses, and they would be more than happy to come and see them. So I hope that we'll continue these agreements and make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Okay, any other public input at all? All right, I'm going to close public input for until later at the end of the meeting. You folks, as I've said last time, are welcome to see the other world of agriculture. If you don't, I would like to recess, because it is a large group and for interruption. Are you guys planning on leaving or staying? Are you? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break here, let everybody head out, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
move on to item 3, which is our director's report.
Thank you. For the record, Jim Barry. So I'll kind of run down a slew of things. What I've done though there is you can see the different dates and activities that I've been engaged in, heavily engaged in the legislative session, largely around the proposed merger of programs coming into the Department of Agriculture since December, since our last meeting actually. So one of the comments is you've heard earlier is that we have signed a cooperative agreement with the American Wild Horse Preservation Campaign. The summary of that agreement is that we will give them the opportunity to take any horses that we collect for public safety purposes for $100 a piece, and then they can then place those horses with local groups out of state, wherever they deem as appropriate, because at the point when they take the horses, ownership will transfer from the state to them. Then if they, again, give them to any of the groups locally or anywhere else, then that would be another transfer of ownership, and they'd do a brand certificate on that. They will also reimburse us for any stud horses that we pick up, $200 each, and we will castrate those horses before we turn them over to them to place on. We'll still obviously follow all the rules relative to feral and stray, and advertise the horses prior to giving them the opportunity to take the horses into ownership. They are requesting a secondary cooperative agreement for the management, basically, of the horses on the Virginia range. We're looking into that to see if it's legal for us to do that, and that's one of the clarifications that Dennis is working on with their executive director right now, to try to define whether or not, and it largely falls around the word control, whether the word control can be construed legally as management versus basically what we're doing, picking them up for public safety purposes. So that's the long and the short of the cooperative agreement, and I can make a copy of that available later on for you folks if you'd like a copy. The sage grouse issues continue to be in the forefront. Met with administration a couple of days ago. We will have in this next budget a Department of Ag position that's basically a range management specialist that will work as part of the sage grouse technical team. Half of that position will be funded in federal money, half of that position will be funded out of pesticide fees related to the noxious weed set-aside money. Those are the regulations that we're working on right now, and I've met with some of the representatives of those groups about the proposed fee increase, and so we're working our way through the rate piece on that. But basically that position will roughly cost $50,000 out of pesticide money, and then we're looking at also creating an additional set-aside for noxious weed, invasive plant work activity on the ground, so that we can actually do some activities that would support sage grouse habitat, and try to, we're working towards doing our part to ensure that they do not get listed. Manganese regulation.
Hold on just a second. Ramona?
Do you mind that questions in the middle of this?
No,
however
you guys want to do it.
Okay. On the sage grouse position, what will they be doing with regard to implementing basically non-endangered listing in the state? I mean, I realize it's not just the Department of Ag, it's the other departments as well, but are we going to be involved in de facto listing for all practical purposes?
The position will be a Department of Ag position, and we're trying to figure out how the final structure is going to work, and the position's already been hired. But basically, that person and I are going to communicate on a weekly or bi-weekly basis as to what activities are going on, so that I can report back to you guys what's working. But ultimately, they'll report to the, I'm going to get all the positions right, the team lead, which is a Department of Natural Resources position. Tim, what's his last I'll get it for you. But, and they'll carry out the directives of the Sage Grouse Council. And be aware we do have Sage Grouse Council, I think the second meeting tomorrow in Carson City at the Gwynn. So basically the council will be the direction giving entity, and you can see the representation of that group. And they'll direct, and then Tim will work as the go-between between those groups. And then utilizing the technical team, they'll work on the sage grouse issue, but I think it's envisioned to be a longer term thing as well. The idea being that if we do get through the sage grouse issues and keep them from getting listed, which is the point, there'll be something else. There'll be some other ta-da. And so I think that's why they're not called the sage grouse team, but they're the sage brush eco system something.
Well, I'm gonna go back in a little history, because we had, I am very concerned about this, because the Sage Grouse Council and through the Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources and so forth, it seems to me will be implementing management actions that are in effect the same as if it would have been listed. And we had that 20 years ago with the desert tortoise. And the desert tortoise was never listed, but 30 ranchers in Clark County were run out of business as a result of it. And it wasn't long after that that Bob Abbey was selling land like it was hotcakes down in Clark County, and now he's under investigation for it. But the problem is, for the state, and my concern with the Department of Agriculture and our involvement with this, is if the Department of Agriculture and or the state basically imposes on a property owner the same as a list, management implications the same as a listing, then the state then becomes liable. And this is not going to go away. The feds, if they're giving money to our position, they're going to be driving the policy through our department. And same as the Department of Department of Natural Resources and so forth. So if we get involved in this, we're pregnant, and we might be implicated, the state might be implicated in any kind of infringement or diminishment of property rights as a result.
Ramona has the same concern I do, is by setting up all these groups, what you're saying is we've already admitted it's going to be listed.
Or we're packing the water for the feds, in effect. I mean, that's the net result. And we already have an example of this in Las Vegas. Now, it's 20 years later, and I can assure you a lot of people, including specifically in the ranching industry, have a lot better handle on what they own out there and what they don't own. And people across the state of Nevada will be a little bit less passive than those 30 Clark County ranchers.
The only thing that I could comment back on is that A is above my pay grade.
Well, this was never really.
No, I know, but I'm saying, I mean, this is the result of something that happened outside of us, and that it's put in. If your concern is that we're going down that road, then we're pregnant. We're definitely pregnant.
I know we're pregnant.
And then, thirdly, the one thing I would say is that there is tremendous rural agriculture representation on the council, and I would encourage you to, well, compared to what it could be,
yeah, I know.
It's significantly pretty. It could be a lot worse. I would encourage you guys to engage with that group and engage with the governor's office. This is being driven directly out of the governor's office. It's the governor's Sage Grouse Council.
Well, and I voiced my concern to this board and this agency as a board member.
Sure.
And you know, it's one thing to do noxious weeds, and which makes perfect sense on any front. It's another thing to be involved in this department in basically de facto listing and the actions that are derived therefrom. And I think that's something we have to be very careful of.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think the position direction is going to be what can we do on the ground related to invasive, because the money is the fees that we're utilizing are very directed and narrow in terms of how they can be utilized, including in terms of paying for his salary. Now, I do think it's good that we have a voice in the room so that we can also hear what's going on in the room, and I think that was part of the ideology, so that I can come back and report back to the board, so you guys are are a part of the conversation to a certain extent. I will say the individual that we hired in the meetings I have has the right ideology, which I think is important. I also think it's important that they've listed the items that are the biggest detriment. Grazing is not the first item listed, and invasive plant species is obviously second on the list and above. So there's some good there, but I know what you're saying.
It's not just grazing that's impacted, I mean, it's.
Oh, no,
it's
no,
water rights,
absolutely.
everything, yeah.
But I mean, in terms of.
Access.
Right.
Jim, how did a noxious weed issue, because I'm trying to envision this, I'm trying to put some common sense behind it. I mean, we've got multiple permits out in the state, and I mean, the problem with noxious weeds is around home on our ditch banks, and how does it out in the open range, how does a noxious weed?
Well, my understanding is from and then on their side, they're referring to it as invasive plants. And so we're basically grouping those together because that's the only way we can contact on this issue. So if you're talking cheatgrass that's coming back as one of the examples after a fire.
Yeah.
And trying to basically do reclamation things that would limit that and get native plant materials back after the fire versus non-native.
And that's some benefits to sage grouse. And
their habitat. As they've listed the most damaging items, and this being the task force pre-council, it was fire, invasive plant, something else, then I think grazing. No, because that would be invasive plant like the junipers and some of that. There was something else third, and then grazing was listed as the fourth detrimental.
The Endangered Species Act historically has been a red herring for some other objective, and that's how it's been used. It doesn't matter whether it's the spotted owl, the willow flycatcher, which magically just happens to appear in the watershed of the Salt River Irrigation District. So I think that, some of these things are just red herring arguments. What we have to be careful of is that we don't inadvertently get led down on a bunny trail to do what the feds want to do through a listing. And I think that's where we have to be careful.
I think that's why they were addressing this as larger than sage grouse. I mean, sage grouse is the current TDA, but they see that as a ongoing group based on if we get things good with sage grouse, let's say, then it's going to be something else.
That's it. I had this question. I asked this question back in Washington, D.C. to the Bush head of Fish and Wildlife Service. I asked him. He was quite proud of the fact, and it was on a California listing. I forget what it was, that they were going to give control and management of the Endangered Species Act to the states, and they were very proud of that. So I dumb broad in the back of the room raised my hand and asked the question. I said, okay, so you give it over to the states, and then who is responsible for the takings if there's any takings of property as a result of it? At which the meeting somewhat unraveled at that point.
Are we off the subject?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to agendize this for a different meeting if we're going to go any further than this.
Okay. So that's the update on what's going on in that.
Thank you, Ramona.
Manganese, those regs, they met, had workshops, had hearings, and then we had a question on whether a label was legal or not, and Dennis had replied back to that. I believe Dave Jones, our division administrator, is putting that information out, and so we'll see if that makes any difference, but it doesn't appear like that there's any limitation on whether or not we can regulate a label or not. And so in the June meeting, it would be my guesstimation that you'll have a reg coming to you for approval or denial that is basically very basic in what we originally agreed that we would take to workshop and hearing, just along the lines of fuel may contain manganese to some percentage, kind of like the ethanol sticker. So that'll be coming in June in the process, so that's where we are. Merger. I've been working very hard on the merger and presenting it to the legislature. All the different groups that are proposed to come into the Department of Ag report to different subcommittees and have different presentation dates. So in some cases, I've given 6 to 7 budget presentations at the session since the session started on these different pieces and parts. So to review, we're looking at bringing in the Dairy Commission, the Child Nutrition, and the Commodity Foods Program. Child Nutrition from Education, Commodity Foods from Administration, and Dairy Commission from Business and Industry into a Food and Nutrition Division. The response that I've received from the legislators thus far has been fairly positive. And I can say, in general, I think one thing that we can also, I don't want to boast about, but feel good about is that our budget presentations to the legislature have been very positive in general and well received. So I think we've done our homework and we've put our things together, and they seem to be very comfortable with how we're doing things, the process side of things. There's always hiccups, and we've got some budget amendments that will be coming out to tweak and fix some things, but in general it's been very positive. But it's hard to predict what's going to happen for sure. Next week, April 2nd, is our budget work sessions. So we've made all our presentations. So then they're going to have one consolidated work session group. So I don't know if that's going to be Government Affairs and Subcommittee on Education together or just Government Affairs. But they're going to look, and the largest part of the conversation is going to be the merger and creating this new division at Department of Agriculture. We've answered what seems to be 200-300 different questions from LCB staffers related to the merger, and have jumped through as many of the hoops as we can, and so it's just a matter of time. Ultimately, whatever happens relative to the merger will dramatically affect the agency. The other budget information that's interesting, I guess is the best word to put for it, our SWI cap, which is the amount of money that we pay for centralized government, has doubled this last biennium and looks to double again this biennium. And so I've got our folks chasing down administration folks to try to figure out why. For some reason, in calculating that, building depreciation is direct funded out of SWI cap. So if our building depreciated by $1.7 million, which is roughly around where the figure is, then that amount is what we have to pay to centralized services over the biennium, as I understand it. So to give you an example, our SWI cap last year was $350,000 roughly per year. This year it's going to be roughly $800,000 per year, which, to give you an indication of how significant that is, the indirect that we would take off the child nutrition grant, which is $150 million a year, is roughly $400,000. So the benefit of bringing in that program is wiped out because of the centralized SWI cap fee that we have to pay. So we're trying to track it down and figure out why that is. It's significantly affecting our budget, which is why I think it's some of the things I want you to be aware of. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get anything done about it or changed. I mean, it is what it is. But I do have some concerns as to why our building depreciation, who calculates that, and why it is so significantly. There's much larger buildings, for example, the Supreme Court, some of the new buildings for LCB, that, $300,000 in depreciation. Why is this building, which is a smaller footprint than those buildings, have such a large depreciation and then directly affecting it? SWI cap fee. So we're working on that. That's one of the budget bumps that we've hit in the road. Ag Day was a tremendous success. I agree with Peter and the comments that he made there. Doug Busselman had also published comments that it was one of the best ag days that we've had, and I think we had a couple of board members that were there. I think for me, the really amazing part was, and it wasn't just Department of Ag, I mean, there were several agencies, several groups involved in MDA, Dairy Commission, Nevada Energy was a major sponsor. Cattlemen's were there in the morning, and I think that's probably one of the things that was the most positive, is it was a very diverse representation of ag, so there was something that appealed to most legislators. For one legislator, it may have been cattlemen's. For another legislator, it may have been Nevada grown. For another legislator, it may be local produce products. But what the benefit was is that, you know, I'm guessing that we had 2/3 of the legislators between breakfast and lunch roll through room 3100. And that's huge. In the last 10 years that I had done the FFA stuff, and we had hosted legislative ag events at the legislature, we always had a very good turnout. But a very good turnout was 20 to 30 legislators. This was almost double that in terms of participation. And not only that, then the dinner activity, which we had a great amount of concern because it was all prepaid, yada yada. We were afraid we weren't going to have much of a turnout because we had such a great turnout breakfast and lunch. We had 20 plus legislators at the dinner, and very diverse group. I mean, I think at one time or another, I feel confident in saying at least 2/3 of the entire legislature was in the room and engaging with agriculture production folks. And that's one of the things we also try to do is ensure that ag production folks, and I think that's something we need to expand down the road. There wasn't a lot of prep, there wasn't a lot of organization. It's better to be lucky than good, obviously, because it kind of just came together and we lucked out. But I think to get even more production representation at that would be significantly positive if I had a downside to it.
Jim? I would like to add one more thing to that. What was, I think, most beneficial about that was it wasn't the cowboys in the room, meaning the cowboy legislators. It was, we were sitting at dinner with the Las Vegas legislator. And that's, we don't need to be singing to the choir, we need to be singing to the folks in the Las Vegas. And I thought that was what was so good.
Yeah, dinner, there was only a couple of rural legislators that even came to the dinner. Right. You know, so it was, yeah, absolutely, good point. So that was very positive, and I think that's carried as well into some of the excitement about what we're trying to do in the merger, and so I think that's helping us as well. But there's a buzz about agriculture right now at the session and in local communities, and you know, a lot of that I think is being driven by some of these local production, small producers, which is great. And I think that's why we want to be a part with them and a part of the bigger agriculture thing, and then we can tell our agriculture production larger scale stories at the same time, and that we're all together and we're not circling the wagons and then shooting everybody or each other. So I think that's really positive. I can't say enough about it. Well, in the State FFA conference last week, they have like 6 legislators that came and did greetings, along with our board president. And so, I mean, there's just a buzz around agriculture right now, so we want to take advantage of and hopefully keep that going. That ag report was released on January 23rd. That was a large packed room. I would say 200. I think Alan was there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alan. I think there was like 200 people there. I think that's part of what started the initial excitement about what's happening in ag is the report and what we had to deliver there. The governor was very positive about the industry, and that's where he announced that he's going to form an ag sector under Dieter for workforce development. And so I'm working right now with the executive office to fill those positions and get that organized. I believe we have a May sometime is the first meeting of that ag sector. Their primary mission purpose is dealing with education and ensuring that we have a trained workforce. I think that's very timely, and that group will be able to engage with secondary agriculture, the 4-H programs, but also with the university program, College of Agriculture Cabinet, and redirecting or advising where those programs should go. And based on where they're doing, what they're doing, and where the things that they're dealing with right now, it's very positive. Two kind of ag ag small production bills that are in place right now. One is the cottage bill that Peter was talking about. Another one is the farm to fork bill. They're very similar, and right now Doug's working hard to try to consolidate their parts and pieces, but the farm to fork would be reflective to more of a small agriculture producer and being able to do, I would use somebody as an example like Latin Farms, and being able to do some direct marketing of non-meat product that they produce to the public without going through a health department inspection, kind of relaxing a little bit some of the regulation requirements on them. Cottage food is more anyone that wanted to, let's say they were known for their great preserves and they produced some kind of preserves and they were selling or peddling those out of their home or through a farmer's market. It gives them a little more flexibility where they wouldn't have to have the Department of Health come in and do an inspection of their kitchens and meet commercial kitchen regulations. Those seem well received, and I think we'll probably come out the other side with something positive. Two bills that we had introduced, AB 19, which transfers the authority of the fair, state fair board commission and eliminates that board and transfers their authorities to NJLS. That's made it through the first, the Ag Committee. It's been approved with an amendment adding a Reno rodeo representative onto the Nevada Junior Livestock Board. Amended and due pass, and so we're waiting for that to get back to the floor in the Assembly. Something that's important for you guys to know, I knew some of this, but I've learned much more in the last 2 months as we've dealt with this and another issue. You are the stewards of the trust of the fairgrounds off of Wells. You are in 50, 51, somewhere in there. You entered into a lease with the Reno Convention Center Authority and leased that property for 50 years. And then in 71, you reestablished that lease for, I believe, like 90 years. But those are state properties that are under the control of the State Board of Agriculture. So one of the things is that since the state fair has gone away and youth livestock is one of the things that's listed on the original trust. That's youth livestock, Reno Rodeo, the Hereford Association, and 4-H FFA. There's one other item. We did get NJLS access to what used to be the state fair offices, and they'll be moving their offices over there after July 1. And utilizing that space, which is going to be good because now we'll have youth livestock with a presence back on those facilities, which is part of the original trust requirements, which has not happened since we lost the state fair. The state fair is a private entity, and the name State Fair Nevada is owned and has attached to it hundreds of thousands of debt dollars, and so we don't foresee. It may be something else may show up called something else, but we probably, unless somebody steps up with big pockets to pay off the debt on the state fair or somebody forgives that debt, you probably won't see a state fair in that title in Nevada anytime soon. But yeah, you guys are the stewards of those facilities, so we're re-engaging. AB 19 transfers the review authority that was in a board that was made in the 80s and never met to NJLS, who uses them yearly, and so we think that that's a good thing. But Reno Rodeo, that was the other thing that's on the list of items that were part of the original trust, which is why Reno Rodeo would get a position on NJLS for when they talk about those issues. Our omnibus bill, AB 20, which is one that I've shown you back in the fall, which is just a cleanup, it's not policy, changing. Eliminates some regs that are duplicate, eliminates some regs that are out of date or statutes that are out of date that we no longer do, like the loan mediation program, and it's duplicated farm services. That was approved, amend due pass out of the Assembly Ag Committee last week. And so we look, as soon as the legal can draft and finalize the amended versions, then those will go to the floor. Right now there's kind of a log jam because everybody had to get everything on the floor by 25th yesterday, or the week before was another deadline, the 15th. But anyway, so that eventually in the next few weeks that'll go to the assembly floor and then head to the Senate. So those are moving along with pretty good support. And we have a really good working relationship with the Assembly Natural Resources Agriculture Committee as well as the Senate Natural Resources. Both committees have very positive chairmen that are very open and transparent, and it's greatly appreciated. Another bill that you might want to be aware of and look at is that, and I don't have the bill number in.
Yes, you have the floor.
Okay. Is the, Tom Grady has a bill that he's put out that raises feeding feral stray livestock to gross misdemeanor, as well as theft as the minimal charge that can be aligned with that. And then if you look behind my report, you'll see a list of several bills that are underway that are attached to agriculture in some way or another. There's raw milk bills, there's some GMO bills, there's lots of diverse things that are in play, lots of public land bills. This is definitely not an all-inclusive, but these are the ones that I've been able to grab hold of and check. It's directly behind my report, not in the same tab. So if you see my report, then behind it should be a document that says PLT, and it's a subscription for the bill monitoring, and then it gives the bill draft numbers in a quick statement.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Vogler, you have the floor.
In our emails, we did not receive the information outline that Mr. Barbie is going over now, just the comment that there would be a report from the director. Was that a computer glitch, or is that not available?
It's on the website.
It's on the website.
It's on the website. If you'll remember, what we've tried to do over the last couple of meetings is post everything on the website so that you can go grab them as necessary. So basically, if you go to the front page of the website, you go to the meeting date, and then you get a choice of the PDF agenda, which is just the agenda, the PDF posted version that we have to do. And then you have one that says linked. When you open that one, you can click those items, and all that backup material is attached to it.
Jim, our concern is the list of agricultural related bills. We don't have that.
I'll check. We'll get you a copy of it one way or another. I thought it was part of the link.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Joanne has a copy of that. If one of you guys want to go grab her and get her to make a copy so you can bring it in and look at it while we're going along here as well, is what Jay has told me. And the last part of my update would be on the web stuff and where we're at with that. We were able to get the State Homeland Security to fund fiber optics to the building, which was roughly around $15,000-$20,000 in costs, because we're probably going to be part of a disaster recovery for information technology in the state system. But that's obviously great for us because all we have here is 2 T1 lines, I think, which I can remember talking about T1 lines when I started teaching in 1996, so that shows you how far the technology is advanced beyond that. So it's installed, but the switches and things that have to be connected to it to make it work hasn't been done. That's going to happen next week. So basically, for all the video conferencing and then our future meetings, you'll be able to, and we'll try to figure out something where we can do it in Elko as well, where we'll have laptops down there if you want to go to the meeting in Elko, as long as we have enough heads up. Then you'll be able to run the whole meeting via the web page and have all the backup documents, and then we won't produce the big hard bounce. And then everything will always be on there for you to go back and pull up and say, well, what did we do a year ago? Didn't we talk about something like that? You'll be able to automatically pull that up, and it'll be a public archive of what we've done in our board meetings. So once we get the fiber up and running, we should be ready to go with that by our next board meeting in June.
I got a question.
Mr. Brazo.
Yeah, Director, what assembly bill is it that talks about any business that's over $1 million gross receipts is gonna be charged a tax? Over and above that $1 million, doesn't matter what you net, it matters what you gross.
Does that matter to you, Peter? Which one is that?
That's the margins tax.
Oh, is that the one with the teachers union?
Yes.
I mean, I've talked to several farmers, and frankly, we better find out more about that or find out what the deal is, because I don't know if anybody in agriculture doesn't gross over $1 million. And you only net a couple dollars, but you gross that much and you spend it all back, and it's gonna hurt agriculture as a whole. I just can't see where that,
I can give you some more insight.
I'd be happy to talk to you
as well, once we get on a break.
Okay, sounds great.
Touch base with some of that stuff. But that's, all I have, unless you guys have questions.
Mr. Chairman, our audio here in Elko is absolutely gone berserk. We can't understand a word that's being said. Sounds like lightning striking or something, or electricity buzzing.
Okay, Hank, how's that? Is that any better?
That's perfect, but we could not understand one thing that Alan said, other than, I think we heard marginal.
Alan was asking about the margin tax proposed by the teachers union. Did you hear that?
Yes, you're perfectly clear. I don't know, maybe it's just with Alan's microphone, I have no idea, but you're coming in perfectly clear.
It's a dairyman thing. They're talking in code.
The summation of the comments were that Peter Kruger here knows quite a bit about it, and he was going to talk to Alan when we get on break. Do you have any other questions relative to my report?
Elko?
No questions.
Anybody else in the room? Yes, ma'am.
I have just a minor comment regarding the cottage industry.
Your name for the industry, please. Is she okay there? Speaking? Okay.
Shannon Wendell. I'm originally from Canada, and the cottage industry there used to be huge. I had several friends involved in it. And just as a FYI, they had one of the biggest food poisoning outbreaks that killed, I can't give you the details, but I would be concerned about that. Because there was no oversight in how it had to do with cheese.
And to understand, I'm just giving a notice on what's happening at the session. If you want to engage in those bills, any of those, you would go through the session. Well above my pay grade.
Well, nevertheless, it's an interesting point, everybody, and I've been following this whole thing with the bills and what have you. You know, I can tell you from personal experience in the livestock industry, we're under such a microscope nowadays because of the mad cow outbreaks. It's so important to keep this overseas export thing alive, and that's one of the things that's still hurting us. We had a complete reversal of what we thought we were going on age and source, where we we're going with the national ID, and all of a sudden you start hearing bills about relaxing on monitoring food programs, and I'm going, oh my goodness. I mean, we have to be very careful. I mean, it's their own, they can do that if they want, but there's going to be a bunch of cattlemen sitting on the sideline someday saying, careful what you wish for. So.
Well, and noteworthy too, though, just so you're aware of, both of those bills are exclusive or exclude meat product.
Well, I know that, Jim, but my point is.
Oh, no, I agree.
You know what I'm saying. If something's going to happen, and I know why they're doing it, and in some ways, the Department of Agriculture, this is one of our, we had battles over this when I first got on the board, is what is our true role here in the state of Nevada, and this is one of the biggest ones, is monitoring and making sure people are getting their fuel pumped right, their the trees and all that stuff coming in for the nurseries don't have bugs, and here we are, we're sending out produce that we have no idea what's in it, so.
Well, I would say, A, that we've not taken a position on any of the bills, and B, the authorities that they report to currently are Department of Health, not Department of Ag. They're outside of us, so that you're aware. Now, I think relative to the proposed merger and looking down the road, that may be something that would fall, if we propose in the next biennium or the next session, to fall under agriculture, but currently the things that they're directly, the statutes that they're addressing do not currently report to the Department of Agriculture. Just Department of Health. But in the future, I think that's something that we may be looking at. So we are talking about it.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, Grady.
And Grady Jones for the record, I wanted to commend you, first of all, just on the direction that we're headed. We talked about educating on agriculture, and it just, man, just some great strides, some great things happening. I was wondering what the plans are down in Vegas. I know right now everybody's up here for the session. We've got the Science Expo coming up down there, and that's a big thing. We probably had 10,000 people come through there last year. Are there some plans to get involved down there?
Oh, absolutely. What we've done, and I'll go back to my original comments, better to be lucky than good. And we were really lucky how well the Ag Day at the session came off, because it really was thrown together, and a bunch of us, sitting around the table for an hour and saying, okay, where are we gonna find the money and who's gonna do what, and kind of throwing it together. We don't have an organized promotion portion yet here at the Department of Ag. If the merger goes through, we will, because we'll get in our budget a public information officer. We already have an agriculture marketing coordinator. We'll have an ag literacy position as well as an ag research position. And the idea is that they will do more in terms of promotion of the industry, not promoting what Department of Ag does, other than how it interacts with the industry to benefit the industry. But for example, the banner that you see here and the banner that's outside was one of the first things, and we got an intern, because we don't have a PIO, so we got an intern out of UNR that put those together for us to utilize at ag events, and that's one of the first things we did, was utilize it at Ag Day. Today, and until we get the budget done, until we get past July 1, we don't have an organized method to start hitting some of these conferences and things, but absolutely that's where we want to go, and that's where we want to hit.
Yeah, this is great.
It's a start.
It is.
And I mean, it's not the best product, but at least we've got something, and it's focused on what's happening in the industry, and that's gonna grow and encompass all of our divisions eventually. And if we have the new food and nutrition division, then that'll kind of change the tweak and on everything as well. So
I know that's one thing. Something like Science Expo is great just because it involves CCSD.
Right.
And it's as simple as opening up the department for their tours as they come through. One day, for a few hours, just some simple ways.
Yeah, we can work with you on that. Yeah, that's easy. That's a no-brainer. You bet. And we'll have, and so that you're aware, when we're talking about the merger in the southern office, we're going to have staff that will be moving into the southern office as well as we would here. If the merger goes through, we're going to go from roughly 70 FTE to 127.5 FTE. So significant new bodies coming in, largely here in the Sparks headquarters. But I want to say that we'll have 6, possibly 8 new staff positions that would go into the Las Vegas office, along with the Southern Office Administrator. So there's going to be some growing pains both here and there, and I think in the Las Vegas office, once we figure out what's really happening, we're going to have to look at some minor capital improvement projects to update a couple of, because there's little office suites in there, but we need to take better advantage of the space that we have. We've got plenty of room to bring that number of people in, but I do think we need to do some updating and tweaking, and we'll have some shuffling around of folks to get everything on the calendar. So we're going to be in a little bit of upheaval if the merger goes through from July 1 to October 10. Some of the new positions will hire July 1, some of the new positions won't hire until October. And so there's gonna be a lot of change in that early time period. Dairy, in some cases, won't be moving in immediately. That'll be further down the road, which is actually kind of nice, because you're gonna be mixing two large groups to begin with and get them settled, and then look at dairy in the future coming in physically.
Thank you. Yes?
Which division will this new group be under?
Food and nutrition, a whole new division.
So statutorily, it's a separate division of the new director?
Yeah, food and nutrition and Department of Ag, right.
Okay.
Any more questions for the director? Let's go ahead and take about Mr. Vogler.
Mr. Barbie, Director Barbie, I understand, I realize that there's a lot of things going on for the legislature and everything, and we earlier had a conversation that under your report, we were going to talk a little bit or touch on streamlining the district lines crossing of livestock, the fact that it has to be made out in triplicate, it's not even carbon copy, and trying to logistically get that online. Has there been any progress along those lines?
For the record, Jim Barbie, in that we have the documents now online, I know that that's one step forward that we've made as part of the web site redesign. I know that some of those forms have now been placed online so that you can access them from home for filling out. For example, the packet that you had called specifically about is now online, so if you don't get the packet or it gets lost somewhere along the way, you're able to go to the website and actually fill out the packet, print the packet off and fill it out. Now, long term, and that's got to happen once we get past the session and once we get into the new positions, because a couple of the positions that will be coming into the agency are actually IT positions. Then we're going to try to do more online actual applications. So in other words, you won't print a document off from the web page and fill it out and then mail it to us, but you would actually be able to enter an application via the web page, utilize a credit card to pay for the process when you're doing it, all inclusive, one go. And that will probably be stage one, and then stage two on that build will be, then it'll automatically produce the certificate and you'll be able to print it out, and then we'll have a digital copy. So let's say it was a cattle permit to move in between district lines. It would print it out, or you would be able to print it out for your benefit. But if we've got ag enforcement officers that are in the field on patrol, based on a wireless connection with the handheld item that they'll be utilizing, they'll already have it in front of them. So I mean, when they saw your truck go by, there would be no reason for them, if you had done everything and if that permit has been approved, it'll be on their screen. They'll pull it up and say, oh yeah, he's got a permit. And they don't stop you, we don't interfere with your stuff, and we have a record of what's happened. That's going to be probably, once we get the positions in place and once we get, I mean, we've got a lot of infrastructure to deal here, IT-wise, with the agency, probably first call. So, you know, I would hope over the next biennium that we're going to get those processes in place. We'll start in one area, build and kind of create a framework that then we can duplicate in other areas. Example would be inspections. Inspections are a similar thing that we do across divisions. If we can build a baseline inspection application, then we can tweak that baseline application to affect consumer equitability or weights and measures divisions, to affect the animal industry division, to affect the food and nutrition division. One of the things that the child nutrition programs, they go out and perform audits on school districts and audits on private nonprofit sponsors. And so that's basically like an inspection for them. The idea is that they would be able to do this all from their phones or from a small either iPad or even the in-between one, the mini pad or whatever they're called. As examples, there's lots of different brands that can be utilized. So we're headed there, but there's we're not there yet, other than we have docs that are put on the website. The other thing I would say is that we're kind of dragging our feet relative to animal industry reorg. And once we get through the session, we know, right now, to be honest with you, we're just dealing with the session. That's got 110% of my time. Once we get past the session, once we start making the reorgs happen effective July 1, which will include the animal industry, then that's where we sit with the leadership of that division and go through these items that need to change and put a priority list on them. And you guys will be interacting with them as we do those plans.
I would just, Mr. Barbie, as we've discussed before, somewhere along the line, there has to be, this spring I will fill out 33 different slips of paper to haul 11 loads of cattle, 160 miles. Either that or we're going to have to establish a Department of Redundancy department, because it's quite redundant. And please, carpal tunnel could be an issue before this is over, but please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Heard and understood, and I resemble those comments. Redundantly.
Okay, if there's nothing else for Mr. Barbie, we'll go ahead and take about a 9-minute and 33-second break, and we'll come back to the our policies issue here on number 4. So we're off the record.
Okay, we're on the record. Do we have our Elko folks ready to roll? Hank, was that a wave that you're ready?
Yep.
You're good?
Okay. All right. So our next item, number 4, under administration report, deals with policy adoption. Real quick, before I introduce our speaker, wanted to let everybody know that first of all, you're going to be told that there's a couple items that are going to be removed that need some more tweaking, if that's the word. And also, our goal is to try to have these done sort of like a consent agenda and approve them all at once. However, if there's something that rubs you really wrong and you have an issue with one of these, we'd go ahead and just remove it, place it at the end of the item, we'll discuss it separately. But if everybody is okay with this and okay with the presentation, then we'll try to do them all at once. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Amy Davey from the state of Nevada, direct from Carson, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, we are so blessed. Directly from the Capitol. So.
Thank you. Thank you, board members.
And your assistant, please introduce.
This is Jenny Hudson, who's here with me, who's done a lot of work on the HR policies, and I asked her to join me. And thank you, board members here in Sparks and in Elko. I feel bad having my back to you, but I guess my front is to you this way. We're just going to review with you a little bit of the policy process that the Department of Agriculture went through, take your questions. We're also going to tell you that even though many of us looked at these many, many times, yesterday, again, we sat down, the 3 of us, looked at them again, and found more minor non-substantive issues that we want to just change in the approved versions. And we can refer you to those as we go through them. Really, for the most part, most of them are where we've left out a word, or we needed to put in a word, or we were just creating consistency across the policies, but we'll bring those to your attention as we move forward. I do want to recognize the tremendous amount of work that the Department of Agriculture put into these policies. They really initiated within the department. Connie Valley did the primary work on these. She then sent them over to us, and we provided additional review, and then Jenny did some additional work on these. These policies will be Department of Agriculture policies, but they are required to coincide and work collaboratively with state personnel policies. So that's, you'll see reference in there to the Nevada Administrative Code, to the Nevada Revised Statute, and to other statewide policies that affect all state personnel. So we've really looked to coordinate your policies with what the state requirements are and bring everything into alignment. I know that policies have been a long time in the making for the department. I know that you've talked about them at previous meetings, and so I hope that this is a win for the department going forward, that we can have these in place. That being said, I'll look to you for your guidance as to how you'd like this to proceed, but what I would like to echo is what your chair indicated, policy HR4 and policy HR11. Policy HR4 on the furlough leave, we believe there may be some changes in the legislature regarding furlough, so we're going to pull that one from approval so we can wait and see what happens. And then policy 11, as we reviewed this yesterday, we had some additional levels of sort of detail that we wanted to go into with this, because there are personnel in the department that, in the course and scope of their duties, do carry firearms, and so we needed to look at this again and just provide some additional reviews. So those two we're gonna pull today. What I'd like to do then is
just 1 second, Amy.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Anderson.
Just have a question. So if we're striking through a couple of these today, I just want to make sure I'm clear on how we move forward with this. Those two sections would have to come back for approval later on?
Correct.
So we don't want to do the whole thing at once?
Well, by consent agenda, basically, we would pull the things that would not be part of the consent. So when we get to that point after they've presented, just as an example, we could say, we're going to pull 3, 4, 11, and 14. The rest we'd like to pass under consent agenda if no one has opposition, and then we could pass all of those at one time. And then we could still come back and talk about those ones we pulled in preparation for bringing something different, or even saying, okay, well, we're actually good with 3 now, so we're going to go ahead and vote on 3. So it gives us that flexibility, but we can get the bulk of them out of the way, so the whole document isn't held up until our next meeting.
Okay. Mr. Frey.
Jim, you referred to 3, 4, and 11. I think
Yeah.
Amy was referring to numbers. Are
4 and
they in
11.
our book?
4 and 11, yeah.
How do we identify?
In the upper right-hand
Oh,
corner.
up on the right-hand corner?
Yes, that should be the policy number.
Okay. And then,
And for the record, Connie said I should have had all of those individually tabbed, and she was right.
Mine's tabbed. Mine's tabbed.
So I apologize.
Shall we move forward then?
Please.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Policy HR number 1 is an attendance and leave policy. We did note in our review yesterday that if you pass this today, we've made a few minor, non-substantive changes to this. Under the references section, we needed to add in the word Nevada Administrative Code. And then on page 3, we also added in where item F, seasonal/intermittent, because you have both types of employees. And those are the only additions that we made to this policy. What was the second one? On page 3, item F, we added in the word seasonal as well as intermittent. HR2 is the catastrophic leave policy. The state has a catastrophic leave program that applies to all state employees. So this policy describes how the Department of Agriculture will administer its catastrophic leave program. We had one minor change. Under references, we are striking the second reference to NRS. It's redundant. Policy HR3 is a policy that describes how FMLA leave is administered through the department. It's a very standard process for the most part. FMLA is a federally protected leave program, so most of our state FMLA policies are very similar. We did add on page 2, item F, supervisor's responsibility to notify agency HR services, that's us, when an employee is within 80 hours of going into leave without pay status. So we both have the supervisors notifying us as well as
Yes, Mr. Barbie.
One clarifying note, so that you're aware, these are some of the conversations that don't always happen and can fall by the wayside. So you understand our structure. After the last session, we had a personnel position at Department of Ag, and then at the last session, we were pulled into this consolidated agency personnel, that's the wrong name, you can correct me, I'm sorry, centralized HR services model. And it was us, education, a couple other agencies. And so that personnel position left. So the relationship and how it works now is if we have any kind of agency, human resources issues or whatever, we work through centralized HR that's located in Carson City. We also provide them with an office here so that they can come up and work with our employees, and it flexes around, but usually every Thursday they come up and spend the day up here because there's other agencies that are in Reno that are part of centralized HR. So that you kind of know how the relationship exists, where before we had our own, now we're part of centralized, and then so that's why we're doing things the way we are. So for hiring, employee issues, any of those things.
Mr. Frey.
Before we get into this too far, could you explain needs in the employee's timekeeping system? Because I'm not up to date totally on it right now, but kind of explain how the I understand it's in here, I've kind of halfway read it, but the comp system, the overtime, the standard pay, who verifies and authorizes an employee's timesheet, how it's kept?
Her, and Amy could correct me, but I'm sure I'll mess something up along the way. Her governor proclamation isn't the right word. Executive order. The director or his or her designee has to approve all overtime. And that came into being, was that Gibbons, I believe?
I believe so. I think
Yeah.
it was, yeah.
Yeah, under Gibbons, that rule was made. So basically, we have two people designated in the agency, myself and someone else, that can approve overtime. Overtime for pay, overtime for comp. So not even the division administrators have final authority on that.
I get, does the employee keep track of his own time and then submit it to you?
They pre-request the overtime unless it's an emergency situation, which I think is addressed in here and identified. And then, which is on need, so they'll go online and say, I'll use an example from my old job. I would go in and put in a request through needs to have overtime during the FFA State Convention week, because I knew that obviously I was gonna run from 6 in the morning to sometimes 11 o'clock at night. And I would put in that request, and that would go to the state superintendent, who was the only authority to actually sign off on it. And then they would approve it or deny it, and would say, no, we think you need to dial this back, da-da-da-da. Now, there's a percentage of time that you can go over, and obviously you can go under. If you go beyond that percentage, then you need to make contact back with the approval authority, or it has to be some kind of emergency. An example of an emergency that we had within the agency is we had one of our agriculturists that was in the field doing bug monitoring, and they're off the grid, no cell phone, They have a flat. This happened a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, their day didn't go the way they hoped it was going to go, because it was their second flat. I mean, they had a spare, and then that blew the tire, because we're in some pretty extreme territories. So based on that, their supervisor contacted us and said, we've got some overtime here. He was stranded, trying to get out of this location, blah, 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 and then we reviewed it and we approved that. First priority is overtime comp, but in some cases, that's not the best way to go. Sometimes if we have financial resources to pay for the overtime, it's better to do that than to give them time off. In other words, if we have, inspectors that are absolutely maxed in terms of it's fall and you're shipping and we need them working all the time, if we give them overtime for comp and they bag a bunch of comp, then we have to have them take their comp. But if they're the only one that can do the inspection, we don't want them to take the comp because we need them to do the work. So there's kind of, it depends on situations. We do have in here a buffer, I believe it's 60 on comp time. Once they get 60, they have to get additional approval from the director's office, and they have to make a plan on how they're going to utilize their comp time by a certain amount of time period to reduce it so that it doesn't get to a point of excess. Or then we may be able to pay some of their comp time down as well. Because it's entered at comp time doesn't eliminate us from the capability of saying, okay, you've got too much comp time on the books, and we can't allow you to take that much time off, because we can turn around and say, we're going to pay you down 20 hours of comp time, in which case they would get the time and a half payment value.
Okay, is the NEAT system all automated and connected to the state controller's office, and all the employees' checks come out of the state controller's office directly here?
And I'll refer to you guys more on the NEAT side of things. If
Sure.
everything's automated, it's all, yeah.
The only thing I'm not sure of in your agency is with respect to some of your intermittent employees that are in the field, if they're all using their computers to keep their time, or if they are still using a manual timesheet and
The
then
majority are manual.
Okay, and then somebody's entering that into the system for them so that they get a check generated. So the majority of state employees are using an online system, NEATS, and that's going in through central payroll. Some of your employees that are in the field work and may not have access to internet or to that program, it sounds like they're still using a paper timekeeping system.
But that is something that as we look at this reorg in animal industry, we will also be reevaluating, and we will start pushing to transfer more of those staff to needs-driven processing. We recognize that brand inspection in the field is a little different venture, largely community service. But in doing that, where possible, where capable, because we do have, Jim Cooney and Elko, we could get him lined up on the needs system, and he could utilize that, and he does a tremendous amount in the fall and the spring in terms of brand inspection, and that reduces the workload then of the office staff in Elko, which their roles will be changing as we become more automated.
Thank you.
Did we answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. All right then, we were reviewing the FMLA leave policy. Additionally, we made a change on page, I wish our pages were numbered.
So we'll go back and add page numbers.
This is the only policy that I noticed that doesn't have page numbers.
There is a page number on it. If you said 6, we'd be perfect.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Where the signature is?
That's funny, there's a page number on 6 only. Yeah, I don't have that on my copy, so we have to. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter, we look at these things 1,000 times, and we still get here and find, we've got page numbers. So on the 1, 2, 3rd page, item M, we've had a recent change to how we are able to request clarification, and so we made a language change in that as well. All right. Policy HR 5, working schedules. As we found a typo here under forms where we put timekeeping system in twice. We'll remove that. We've added on page 2, at the very bottom, item 6, the word intermittent. We recognize that Department of Agriculture has many types of employees, and in the state we refer to them as seasonal or intermittent or part-time. So we wanted to make that consistent throughout the policy, that all those employees were referenced. Those are the only 2 changes on that policy. Policy HR 6, which is your overtime approval and reporting. The only change that I see on this policy is page 1 under form. We've just cleaned up a little bit to say to remove timekeeping system and just refer to needs. Policy HR 7, which is a policy on outside employment authorization. To a large degree, this is driven by state policy. There were no changes on this policy. . Policy HR 8, work performance standards, we found some duplicative language under responsibility. 1B, providing reports of employee evaluations due, that actually is in the next policy under employee appraisal and development.
Which, I'm sorry, could you repeat that last
Yes.
change?
Responsibility, this is page 1, policy HR 8, responsibility 1B, providing reports of employee evaluations due. We've removed that because that would be part of the employee appraisal and development policy, not work performance standards.
Thank you.
HR 9, employee appraisal and development policy. We had, what were we showing here? Okay. For consistency purposes, under responsibility, the Nevada Administrative Code reference, we've added in the full reference throughout this policy. And on page 3, item 6A, there is a prescribed form. We added in the title of the form. Policy HR 10, workplace violence prevention. As we reviewed this yesterday, we recognized that there were not very many references in the Department of Agriculture policy to the state policy, and the state has a very comprehensive workplace violence policy through our Division of Risk Management. So in a few locations, primarily on this front page, we have just added reference into the state workplace violence policy through the Division of Risk Management. So these are all just references to the state policy. Additionally, at the top of page 2, where we say each supervisor shall be responsible for, A says immediately investigating. Actually, the Division of Risk Management is responsible for investigating, so we changed the language to immediately responding to the complaint or incident. Supervisors are not required to investigate. Risk Management does that. And on the last page 4, we made a change. Instead of spelling out the name of our agency, we just put in our acronym. Policy HR 11, we requested the pull from consideration today. Policy HR 12, operating the vehicle on state business. The Department of Agriculture utilizes what they refer to as a driving record card in order to confirm that employees that are required to drive within the scope of their duties have a valid driver's license. That is maintained at the agency level. We provide new employee orientation through our office. However, we wouldn't be responsible for maintaining the driving record card, since that is a agency-specific policy. So under procedures, item 1, we just removed where we say at the time of employee orientation. So there will be a period after the words complete a driving record card, period. So there's no confusion that we are doing that at new hire orientation. That's in fact happening at the agency when they are bringing a new employee in. Policy HR 13, ethical behavior, had no changes. Policy HR 14, volunteer services, had no changes. Policy HR 15, training / employee development. You will see on page 7, we forgot to remove the word draft. So we're just striking out the word draft. Top of page 7, which is the form that the agency wishes to use. Policy HR 16, recruitment and hiring. On page 1, we have, under references, some duplicative language where we've referenced NEC twice, and we spelled out the name of the form. We call it an RTF, but instead we spelled that out in the policy. And then we did note yesterday on page 5, and this was an important change under item 10. This is relative to employees that are required, whose positions are required to pass a pre-employment drug screening test. These are positions that are identified by the state as part of their alcohol and drug program. Under item 10, the way that that works is the agency makes an offer of employment, and then the employee goes and gets tested. But we do not test people who do not have an offer of employment. So under item 10, we are putting a period at that last sentence after the word NAC and striking the words "and pass that drug testing before being offered employment." It's what's called a conditional offer of employment. You pass your background test, you pass your drug test, and
that first part of that should probably change too, then shouldn't it? Because it starts with no job offer. On 10. If it's actually a job offer has been made, then.
I think what it's saying here is
no final job offer.
No, I think what it's saying is just it appears to me that it's saying that the agency needs to be interacting with HR prior to making the job offer to make sure that the correct information has been submitted. We've checked for layoffs.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. The wording on these things gets so tricky. Policy HR 17 on personal appearance had no changes. Policy 18 on employee termination. We actually just found a few grammatical errors on page 3, B, 4. And we've capitalized the word department and added in the word the, took out a, or actually it looks like
Removed a comma.
Removed a comma. So just purely grammatical changes on that one. Yes, sir.
I read through this real briefly. It's more like talking about voluntary termination, the employee voluntarily terminated.
Yes.
What about involuntary, when the employee is being disciplined?
Right.
Do you have another policy for that?
Indeed.
But it's not in here?
Yes, we did.
It is in here?
Yes. I brought my policy book with me. You'll see it's a rather large book. The state does prescribe a policy for progressive discipline and separation under that process. Because that's done through regulation, and that's done through a different means of adopting those regulations, we prefer not to reference every regulation in your policy, because then when a regulation changes, you have to rewrite and reapprove your policies. But since we know that all state employees are subject to the state regulations, there is a whole set of regulations that describe involuntary termination in those regulations.
Okay, one other question. The majority of this information that we have in here that's in these procedures, is the majority of the other state agencies kind of complying or have the same type of procedures, am I correct?
I'm glad you asked that question, because it's a very important goal for us in centralized HR services that we have consistent practices for employees throughout the state. There isn't a lot of movement in and out of the Department of Agriculture to other agencies. People that come to work here stay and work here. They don't transfer to business and industry or Department of Public Safety very often. However, consistency is important because the state is one employer, and so that's something that we do look at across our agencies. Are we providing consistent policies, and at the same time allowing the agency to meet their business needs? So agriculture has specific business needs relative to people in the field and people who don't have access to keeping their timesheets online, and volunteer services. Not all of our agencies use volunteers. So there's a happy medium we try to find between providing consistency and also allowing the agency to say, in our agency, we really want this to reflect our best practice culture. Do we have any questions about the content of any of the policies?
I have a question on drug policy. If you have an employee that is hired under this program, under our board policies we have here, and they're hired with a drug test, and is there subsequent drug testing after that?
There's a requirement for your employees who have CDL licenses. That's a federal requirement for random drug and alcohol screening. So your agency has a agreement with a provider of CDL random drug and alcohol screening tests. Those results come to our office, and then we notify the agency that a person with the CDL is in compliance with the random screening, and then if there are ever any issues, which there have not been that I'm aware of, we would notify the employee of that as well. Beyond that, the state does not have any provision for random testing. The state only has provision for reasonable suspicion testing. So if there were a reasonable concern.
I had a similar issue. My daughter was in a class where we had a teacher that was arrested for photographing the adult bathroom. And the problem was the school district had done the initial, background on this teacher. He'd been there for so many years, nobody subsequently followed up, and he had this little problem. And so the question is, do we hire somebody and then have a problem down the road where we can't really go back and keep and maintain a record whether or not they've been involved with drugs or alcohol? And we've got law enforcement officers, we've got other people that have pretty important positions. Not that I don't think it's a big problem, but shoot, the mining industry can hardly find people that are clean to hire. So, it is a problem of our culture.
We do not have a provision for random screening other than CDL holders. That's all reasonable suspicion.
Hank, Boyd, you guys okay over there in Elko?
Doing 110 on the corners.
All right.
What are you driving?
Probably a Dodge.
Do we have any other questions about the policy content, or any concerns, or any thing that you'd like to see change or suggestions?
I'm okay. Anybody have any more questions for these young ladies?
I want to compliment all of you. I was telling the director that this made perfect bedtime reading, because it didn't take long before you were drifting off, and to go through and find these little issues with it, I'm impressed. The only ones that I had concerns with were the ones, one of the ones that were striking through. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the department policy adoptions with the minor changes, as well as striking out item 4 and number 11.
Mr. Anderson has given us a motion. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Mr. Perazzo made the second. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Actually, I'm a little disappointed in that report in a lot of ways. That was supposed to get us to the lunch hour.
Oh, sorry. We could go back and go through them line by line.
Yeah, you can.
That was the whole point.
A break.
Oh. No, Plant Industries will take.
Thank
Thanks. Okay, thank you, ladies. Drive careful. Lunch is gonna be here soon, and we are almost done with the meeting. So, why don't we go ahead and break? We'll, I'm sure our folks in Elko might wanna go travel somewhere and have a little lunch, and, we'll eat early and get back here and get done early. How's that?
What are the next agenda items? Because I don't have, you can print out the agenda.
Yeah, I think we did. So does that sound like a plan? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's do that. We'll go ahead. Elko, have a fine lunch.
What time you want to reconvene? 12?
Yeah, let's do 12.
12 or 12:30? We got to drive a little ways just to even get anywhere.
Well, yeah, but McDonald's isn't very far. Come on.
I bought last time. It's Boyd's turn to buy. We're going to go a little better than.
Oh, you're going to the Star. Great. Okay, 12:30. All right. We're off the record.
Okay, we're back on the record, and welcome back, everybody. I hope everybody had a good lunch. And we're going to move right along here to plant industry, number 5. There they are. Wow. Okay, it's item A. The item reads, for the record, request approval to go to workshop hearing on proposed changes to NAC 587.173, which designates seed of certain plant species as prohibited noxious weed seeds. Steve Marty, you have the floor, and this is for action, or possible.
Okay, hello everybody. For the record, Steve Marty. I work for the department here in Sparks in the plant industry division, and we are requesting to go to workshop and hearing for a reg change. It's in code. It's in part 587.173, and again, that's the list that designates seeds as noxious. And we are wanting to make an exemption for Anthemus scutula, that's mayweed chamomile. And as stated in the board packet, the driver for this is pressure from Pacific Northwest seed producers, handlers, distributors that are having trouble with marketing due to the listing of this species. We're currently the only state in the union listing this one, so we're kind of the sticking point for commerce for these guys, at least it's how they see it. Our industry sees it slightly different, but after some kind of informal debate, we've decided it's probably time to request permission and go through the formal process and then have a decision after we discuss that in workshop and hearing. So we're here to ask permission to do so. Any questions on this guy?
Any questions? Any help with the pronunciation of this word in here? Mayweed chamomile?
Chamomile, yeah.
Chamomile.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Can you just summarize the...
Basically, Jim, folks that market seed to a variety of states.
Anyways, everybody, the summary is that folks marketing seed in all 50 states like to get what's called an all states noxious exam conducted by a laboratory. So when they are, looking to address state requirements, they can fulfill that in one test in a lab, where basically the labs, and ours works the same way, gets a list every year, an updated one of every species listed by every state as noxious. So they'll go through that, look for those particular seeds in a seed lot. If they don't find any, then it has basically the all states noxious designation. They can take that seed and mark it wherever they want within the 50 states. So if in this case, in turf, when mayweed is coming up in the turf lots, then they can't market that way anymore, and they're having to either clean seed, remarket seed, or it's basically just a logistical hurdle for them. So we've gotten pressure from them in the interest of interstate commerce, these kinds of things, and there's a number of, unfortunately,
fairly powerful groups that have asked us, to initiate the change in the interest of interstate commerce, basically, so that these folks can get that all states noxious designation and market that turf seed to all 50 states. And evidently, it's a bit of an issue to get mayweed chamomile seed out of turf grass, and that's why they're having some difficulties, why it's popping up. And so basically, we have 2 lists in Nevada. It's a little bit complex, and we're hoping to sort out a lot of these issues during the workshop and hearing process. But there's a list that designates the actual species as it's growing as noxious, and there's a list that designates the seed as noxious. And in some states, those aren't the same thing. Here, we've adopted a format since '07 where every noxious species, the seed of that species is also designated noxious. And so this has come up, I think, as a result of that change in '07. But basically, we would be able to delist the species on the seed list while keeping it on the weed list. So it would still be managed as a noxious weed in Nevada, but these folks would get an exemption, basically, on the seed list in the of commerce, interstate commerce, if we did go through with the change. If not, if our industry can provide a good sound argument as to why we wouldn't delist this, then we'd hopefully have a final designation that way, and kind of put it to rest either way. And again, there's a little bit of complexity there, and we're hoping to kind of pan that out during that workshop and hearing process with our industry, as well as these representatives from the Northwest who we're obviously in close contact with because they kind of initiated this, or they want the change, basically.
So basically what this says, you're going to add it to the list so it is okay.
Correct. We're going to provide basically an exemption because all weeds listed in 555-010 were adopted by reference, but we're going to keep that by reference listing, but make an exemption for mayweed chamomile as far as this language reads. But again, more than anything, what we're hoping to do is just kind of discuss the issue in the formal arena and just get an answer one way or another, because there's certain facets of our industry, and especially the folks in Paradise Valley, who probably are not real supportive of this. But based on the exchange that we've had with these folks in the Northwest, we've decided, we need to put it through formal process and get an answer either way, And personally, I would support the change to make the exemption. Because again, in the interest of interstate commerce, we have to have regs that sync up with other states and that sort of thing, and we're a bit of a stumbling block here, and I would support the change. But again, we're looking for industry input, and if they can provide a good argument as to why not, we'll certainly consider that.
Why would the folks in Paradise Valley be against this?
They have a problem with this particular weed. In basically range and crop or pasture interface. It's one that won't really do well out in the range, but it will do, in disturbed areas that may receive some irrigation water unwillingly, or basically on that range crop interface is where there's a problem with it. And as far as I know, the folks out in Paradise, as far as Nevada producers, are the only ones that really have a big problem with this particular species. So again, they might have an issue with that, but whether or not the seed is the vector for that and this sort of thing, remains to be kind of hashed out during that workshop, basically.
And the turf guys are driving this?
Correct, and that is not turf producers in state, that's turf producers in the Pacific Northwest, and a number of seed councils or board, that sort of thing, have submitted requests for the law to be changed. UC Davis has commented on their behalf, and then the American Seed Trade Association, which is kind of a more or less a federal oversight type of agency, again, for kind of interchangeability or equivalency with state regs is what they're looking out for, and they're kind of the drivers of this thing, basically.
Is it a broadleaf or a grass?
I believe it's a broadleaf. Robert?
Yeah, it's a broadleaf.
Yep.
Robert Little, for the record, says not should be coordinator for the Department of Agriculture.
And again, Jim, we would still have it listed as noxious on the weed side. So as far as control, that sort of thing, all that would remain the same. It would just get an exemption to where if it was present in a seed lot, it wouldn't necessarily prevent that seed lot from being marketed in Nevada for sale.
That's where I get lost. I can't put that two together. Why you would consider it noxious as a plant, but let the seed be delisted?
Right, and see, there's two schools of thought in this. Historically, states have really had two separate lists because some species that were designated as noxious, the vector or the reason for its spread was not necessarily related to seed loss. And so in the interest of not listing too many species that maybe weren't relevant because they weren't spread by a contaminated seed, they would maintain two separate lists. And we were like that in the past, where we only listed a handful on the noxious seed side versus, maybe, I don't know what there is, 80 or something on the weed side, But then there's a school of thought now that, well, if it's noxious as a plant, it should be noxious as a seed, and we're going to have both lists the same, which is what we adopted basically in 07. But, at least in my opinion, and some other folks as well that are driving this, the contaminated seed lots may not be the issue for this particular species, and in the interest, again, in facilitating that interstate commerce, I'm not of the mind that if we give the exemption for Anthemus, that all of a sudden we're going to have, Anthemus everywhere in the state as a result of contaminated seed loss. But again, that's something to be hashed out during the workshop process, but, the exemption would be just on the seed side, not on the weed side, which again is fairly typical, again, in other states have those two separate lists that way.
Mr. Frey?
There are some areas, Steve, that a noxious weed, it's just, a weed's just a plant growing in the wrong place, as I understand it. Like sumac, as an example. We tried to establish a wildlife habitat for a lot of birds like dove and quail and all this. And sumac was one of the ones that the wildlife people told us to plant. And then they came back, another department comes back and says, well, that's a noxious weed. And yet it does really well in our big, deep drain ditches because it kind of holds back and stabilizes the banks so they don't slough in, when the water comes. So I guess my question is, how do you establish whether it's a noxious weed on my property or the wildlife property, and how do you get by that? Because like sumac really has a lot of little tiny seeds that are great for the birds, and they just flourish on it. And I'm sure they're going out and dropping the seed everywhere. But what do you do in that case?
So there's fairly clear definitions as to what makes a weed noxious or a candidate for that list, but I would probably have to defer to Robert Little, who's again the noxious weed program coordinator, for that answer, because I'm not necessarily involved in listing of the actual plant species. So, and that's what would now trigger listing of the seed species, right? Because if the noxious weed folks in our department decide to list a weed species, then by default or by reference, the seed is also going to be listed as noxious. But I'd like to defer to Robert, since that's his world, his program, to give you an idea of what qualities make a plant species deemed noxious, basically, is what the question is, right?
I guess my concern is, like, we have a lot of kochia weeds, and it's everywhere, and we burn it, and we try to spray it out and everything else. You go back in the Midwest, and they plant it and grow it for feed, for the cattle and stuff, and I think they harvest it. I just don't know how you get around where I'm trying to manage, or someone's trying to manage their property differently, maybe another area of the state or the country. How do you determine that? How do you, would you have certain regions that this is noxious in and not in others?
Not in the state of Nevada. We don't have a region that, one particular weed is noxious and it's not noxious, like say one county to the next, or north or south, or however you want to look at it. The noxious weed list is all encompassing within the state, our state noxious weed list. We have 47 weeds on the state noxious weed list, and typically what deems them as being noxious, are the ability to do, are they easy to control, how rapidly they spread. Do we actually have them in the state at this point or not? Is this something that we want to try to prevent from coming into the state? Is what lands them on the noxious weed list. Right now, Paradise Valley is the only area that we've actually had mayweed chamomile present. They did a pretty good job of controlling it in that area, and to date, they're not really seeing it pop up right there. And so it was one of those weeds. It's been on the list as long as we've known. It's been on our state noxious weed list that anybody here in the department can remember as far back. But it's one that they did a really good job of controlling there, and they're just, the reason why they look at it as being, one that they would fight to try to keep, from being delisted is because they had issues with it in the past. We've not seen it really anywhere else in the state, so that's one of the reasons why we with the amount of rainfall and everything that water and everything that it takes for this weed seed to grow, it's been considered by a lot of people in the Pacific Northwest, and also Steve mentioned UC Davis and stuff, that it would take a lot of annual rainfall for this one to grow. And so the thought, process that, if the seed lots were going to be small, if there weren't many seeds in the seed lot, the chances of actually it coming up in various growing areas would be slight, and it would be something that we could tolerate at that point. So, and I don't know if I answered your question. I think your question was more in terms of what causes them to be on the noxious weed list, but this is one of the reasons why we were looking at that one to be regulated a little bit differently.
And ultimately, still state's power to designate whatever species of plant or seed that we deem or our producers deem as a problem meeting the noxious criteria. It's still the state's right to designate whatever it wants on there, so we don't need to necessarily play nice with these folks, but just in the interest of stimulating that interstate commerce, to me, it makes sense to at least discuss formally in the workshop setting, so that all these parties that are involved can provide comment or input during that workshop process. We can then make an informed decision as to whether we're going to make an exception or not, because again, that power still lies with the states individually determine, what's an issue for their constituents, and they're going to list species accordingly.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Barbie.
Just a reminder, you're basically telling them whether or not they can go look at this as an opportunity. You're not making a decision on whether it will or won't be. And you are the authority on what's on the noxious weed or not on the noxious weed list. That's a regulatory control that falls under the Board of Agriculture. The other thing I would suggest is Robert's done a dandy job of putting together on the website a description of all the noxious weeds, including a picture and all the scientific background and information. So if you get an opportunity between now and whenever this would come forward, you can get on that website and look at every noxious weed and what it looked like. And Robert's recommended it's really nice.
Did you have a book with pictures in it?
As well.
All enough?
Right, online, and we can get the.
And I've got copies of those as well. If you can bring those, never taken one of those easily.
So yeah, but what we're looking for here is just an up or down on whether we can go out and even consider this under workshop and hearing.
Yes, Mr. Jones.
To me, it seems like a no-brainer to go to workshop and talk about it. But now you were mentioning some states have two lists for seed, and are we looking at something like that down the road, since a lot of these are probably been on a list for
Already structured that way here. So it was historically structured that way in the state until 2007. But what you had was only a few species listed that were known to be an issue because of the fact that, for example, they're difficult to clean from seed lots, or just they're prevalent in seed lots, and seed lot contamination is kind of the vector for the spread of that particular species, right? So we had that scenario until 2007, and then we kind of had pressure from BLM for one, to adopt the other. They're both two list systems, but just one approach is that every species listed as a weed, the seed from that's also listed as noxious, regardless of if that's the mechanism for spread, etc. If it's noxious as a plant species, it's noxious as a seed species, which makes a lot of sense, but again, sometimes, some of these things that are on the list don't even, reproduce via seed, for example, so then it's a little bit pointless to have that listed in the seed side, so historically, the seed side was much more condensed than the plant side, basically. And we've adopted now since 2007 the approach where if it's noxious as a plant species, it's noxious as a seed species, and then these things have kind of been surfacing, I think, ever since then. And to be honest, it's been a number of years now since these folks began putting pressure on us, and more than anything, whether we support this or not, I'd like that to go really to industry through the workshop process. But what we need is I think, for this thing to go through formal process so that we get these guys a definitive answer instead of this kind of back and forth. You know what I mean? We've had some turnover with Scott Marsh to Robert, differing views there, but just to put this thing through the formal process, get input from our industry, and then make an informed decision. I think what we need to do at this point, whether or not we grant the exception, basically.
Thank you, Steve. We're ready for a motion.
I'd like to make a
Mr.
motion.
Craig.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the workshop for identifying noxious weeds. Workshop or workshop and hearing?
What would you like?
Both. Workshop and hearing.
Tell us what you want, don't ask.
I'll second.
It was a persuasive question. Okay. Motion's been made, Mr. Frey made it, Mr. Anderson provided the second. Is there any more discussion? All of those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimous.
Just curious, one last thing, if the board would like an update post-workshop, or if we should just present again post-hearing for the board's approval, that's the standard process, or would you guys like an update at post-workshop?
We'll see how it progresses, and then we'll determine as we move forward.
Thank you.
Jim has a question.
Yeah, Robert, I just wanted to ask you if there's any progress on the Douglas County noxious weed issue that we talked about.
Well, we've been meeting with, went down and met with Jeff and Craig with the Douglas County weed crew, I guess, because they're not technically a weed district down there. I guess some of the issues were, trying to get some of the non-compliant landowners into line to comply with the noxious weed regulations. I got a list from Mr. Burr of some of the ones that he was concerned about. I spent a couple hours with him riding around and looking at some of the issues. I plan on going down again in the next couple of weeks when stuff starts really greening up, because some of the stuff we were looking at, there just wasn't any presence of what we were looking for at the time. So I'm going to go down in another couple of weeks and take a look at that and see where we're at, and then work with Jeff and Craig on bringing those properties into compliance, or at least hopefully get them started on working on the noxious weed problems that they've got. And so there has been some movement on that. It's just we're waiting a little bit here to see things green up so we can take pictures and better report on what they actually have, and then work with the landowners to be able to go out with them and show them, hey, this is what we're looking at here. This is something that is a noxious weed by definition and by regulation. You need to take care of it. And so we're just kind of waiting on the season to kind of progress a little bit at this point.
Okay. Well, I know there's a lot of concern on the part of.
Oh, I know. And I went down a couple weeks ago and I met with the Conservation District. I sat in on one of their meetings and went over some of the issues that they were having down there, and working with them and Mike Hayes as well. I think we're going to hopefully be able to get a couple more. Trying to get everybody to comply would be great. But if we can start in on that process and get some other people to work on it. We're also going to be working with the tribe down there because they've got a real big knapweed problem down there as well. So hopefully we can. We've got a little bit of funding set aside where it's supposed to be designated just for BIA programs, and hopefully we can help get some of that problem cleaned up as well.
Okay. Tell them if they would send the early part of the water in the Carson straight down and not use it, and wait till after August, their weed problems would be a lot better.
I'm on that.
Don't tell them who said that. Okay, all right, we'll find you.
Thank you much. And I'll put a handful of the noxious weed guides up at the front desk, or I can bring them in here either way you guys want them. If you guys want to take some with you, you can have a copy of those as well. Would you rather at the front desk or bring them back here?
The little books?
Yeah.
Bring them
I'll bring them in, okay.
But you gotta check out the website, you did
Yeah.
a nice job on that.
Thank you.
For sure.
All right, thanks, Don and your crew.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Heck of a job. Okay, Wildlife Services.
That'll be me. Just
Okay,
a couple
Mark.
of quick points to make you aware of. First off, in the budget presentation that we did at the legislature, there was some confusion relative to who puts together the Endow Wildlife Predator Control Plan, which confused me as to why there would be confusion. But some of the legislators thought that that was money that Department of Ag was taking from Endow and then putting into this plan that Department of Ag developed for predator control. And so we, and through follow-up questions and everything, have tried to be very clear that Endow develops their own plan and that the Nevada Department of Agriculture is simply a clearinghouse for that approximately $400,000 that they chose to.
Close that. Reading, please.
Thank you. That then goes to Wildlife Services to implement the plan that Endow put together. And so I think that we've got that clarified, hopefully for the most part.
Director Barbie, clarification, please. Hank Vogler for the record. Can you hear me?
Oh man, can we?
Okay. Have you got that correct, Jim? My understanding was that the Hunt Application Office got the money because they obviously collected the fees. Then they separated it out. Endow then had an administrative fee that they could charge. It went into your account, and I may be overly simplistic, then it's set there, and then Endow would develop the program of what they would use the money for, but do it through agriculture and through APHIS employees. I thought that was the correct protocol. Where am I wrong?
I think we're saying the same thing, except for the amount isn't a guaranteed certain amount. The Wildlife Commission can determine what the amount set aside for the plan is. The point that I wanted to make wasn't as much to do with the money as it was to do with who developed the plan. The Wildlife Services, nor does Department of Ag develop the Endow Predator Control Plan to benefit wildlife. And that was some of the confusion. They saw it like Department of Ag had these magical abilities to swoop into Endow's budget, pull these $400,000 roughly over, and then do with it as we felt needed to be done relative to Nevada wildlife. And so we were trying to clarify that with them, that basically the work is done by Wildlife Services and in some cases Nevada Department of Agriculture staff, because we already do that kind of work and house that kind of staff. And so that was a clarifying piece. One of the things that is noteworthy is that Assemblyman Bobzing has a bill in right now that would change that funding system, and basically those funds would be utilized, and hopefully I'm quoting this correctly, to do a plan or to do a study on whether predator management was beneficial relative to wildlife, A, and then B, secondarily, to benefit sage grouse habitat. And so that's currently in the session by Bobzing. The second thing I wanted to make you aware of, there is a 24-hour check bill for traps that's in place as well. And that eliminates the exemption for wildlife services, which means the wildlife services, Department of Ag staff doing that work would have to check those traps every 24 hours. I had Mark put together a fiscal note on that relative to the idea that we have 7 state employees that do a certain workload now. How would that law impact us being able to do that same workload? So in other words, if we have to check traps every 24 hours, what for us to do the same amount of property or size geographic area, how many more additional staff would that take? And I think the last figure, I'm not sure if we've attached the fiscal note yet or not, we're still working on it, but I think the last figure I saw from Mark was around 28 staff, in addition to the 7 staff, because these areas are so remote where those traps would be set. Otherwise, it would be a decrease in the level of work that was being accomplished on that. So be aware, those are a couple of the bills that are relative to predator control and would affect wildlife services that Mark is working on right now. Questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Does the...
Your name for the record, please.
Mary Ann Olsner. Does the Department of Agriculture have anything to do with the regulation of the traps?
No.
No, that's just the wildlife people.
Any other questions on wildlife services? Okay, moving on. Item 7, animal industries. The Central Grazing Committee. Drought update by Hank Vogler, and also the sage grouse update by Hank Vogler. Hank, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. I'll try and be brief. John Fallon at the last Central Committee meeting asked me to speak with you, and not so much as preaching to the choir, but to get it on record of kind of where we're going with this situation. As most of you are more than aware of, some of us are in our second and even third year of drought or going into this drought, and there is a tremendous value of having livestock on the public domain, obviously. There's a university study going on right now, and the preliminary findings are an AUM to the state of Nevada, an animal unit month to the state of Nevada, is worth right about $100 in resale of the things that it takes to take that AUM off. And that goes from buying gas to tires to hired men to FICA taxes, all the things that go into making that product for the market, i.e. beef, lamb, and wool. Annually, yes. This is an annual thing. It's very, very important to some of these smaller communities. And of course, we've already, whether it be environmental movements or changes in policy, we've lost 97% of the sheep, and we've lost almost half of the cattle since the early 80s, since the environmental movement really got legs. So the devastation to some of the smaller communities in the rural counties is truly there, and we hope that it can be recognized that the contributions of these rural counties to the state of Nevada, agriculture as a whole, produces about $4.5 billion worth of enterprise to this state. And as this drought continues, we're wondering, as a Central Committee, is there any contingency that Board of Agriculture or the Agriculture Department could help and assist people that have either been burned out in the areas where the livestock have been removed and the areas burned up from lack of grazing, which dovetails right into our sage grouse problem. You know, if you want to, if they say cheatgrass is no good for the sage grouse, well, sheep and cattle can remove a lot of cheatgrass, and sagebrush obviously is not the most palatable plant for livestock, and so it begins to dominate in a few short years if you remove some of the grass, and it balances things up. So the Central Grazing Committee would like you to be abreast of the fact that we are in trouble. I realize Board of Agriculture and the Agriculture Department has some standing with these committees and things, and rather than blame livestock, we should use livestock as a tool to alleviate some of these problems, and it seems pretty diabolical to us as grazers that we are spending all this money doing 12 years of studying, and we're going to have more committees and do more massaging of the situation when we know that the largest and biggest problem of all is not habitat loss, it is ravens. And we're not addressing ravens, and Wildlife Services' hands are tied to the point that if Wildlife Services comes along, it will not only get, but it could have a tremendous impact on mining and all of the rural communities of the state. And that is my report. If there are any questions, or if there's anybody that can contribute to the fact that is there contingency plans? We've obviously dealt with droughts in the past here in Nevada. Are there anything in our rules and regulations that may help alleviate some of these problems, whether it be the sage grouse or the drought? Thank you.
Hank, this is Jim Barbie. You had a question on your $100 per AUM, or are you saying that's the economic impact each AUM makes?
Every time you remove one animal unit a month, which is one cow and a calf or one bull, that's $100 loss to the state economy.
Okay, it's economic impact.
So if you have, like me, my sheep are pretty tied to federal land 12 months, whether it be Forest Service or BLM. Every 5 sheep that I have is 1 AUM. So it costs the state of Nevada, if you take 5 sheep off, $1,200. So in the rollover from the guy that's selling me the gas to the guy that's driving the truck to the guy that's selling me the tire to the guy that's putting the tire on the truck or whatever.
Economic impact.
The business, the economic impact. The preliminary studies have come out between $90 and $110, so I split the difference, right? And then I can do cowboy math or sheep herder math, whichever comes first.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Hank
You're
and
breaking
Boyd,
up, sir. Sorry.
Hank and Boyd, this is Davey. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can now.
A couple things on the drought. One thing you have to remember too is we're seeing the same thing happen in private lands as well. The effect of the drought, number one. And number two, have you guys had a visit from the NRCS folks in the last 6 months talking about the new programs they have for drought assistance? Have you seen those folks at all up in that area?
We have NRCS offices both in Elko and Ely that I'm aware of, in practically every town that they have an FSA office. Many of the programs are almost too late, it appears. The participation in the state of Nevada right now in NRCS, because they do have their conservation reserve programs and they do seem to have more of an eye on agriculture, but in the same building, Farm Service Agency, 89% of the people who qualify for the programs are so frustrated by the administration of those programs they no longer even apply. We are 46 out of 50 states in participation in the FSA programs, and many of them are tied to the NRCS. NRCS is far more user-friendly, but most of the programs are geared to some specific things that are more applicable in a lot of cases. It appears at first blush to be tied to private land rather than public graze.
Well, what I wanted to explain, what I saw in Fallon was a presentation where, and there's a ridiculous side of this story at the end, and it's very typical of federal programs, but it looked like they made it a lot easier, and it isn't too late, because now they've linked it to where you can look at a national data climatology of that area, and it has the different colors of that range that you're in. And if your range happens to be the right color, which is red, then you can have funds, and you don't have to show how many cattle were hurt. It's just if that permit that you proved you had in that area was hurt by a drought, you can receive funds from it. But here's the funny side of the story. They hand it to the private insurance companies to deal with it, and there's only one agent in the state of Nevada that handles it, and she's in Lovelock, because the bureaucracy is so ridiculous that private insurance carriers won't handle it. So I just wanted to know if you guys heard about that. And, you can do all you can to try to talk your own insurance agent in, but like ours, if they've done it before, they won't do it again. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Boyd.
I just want to, just for the informational intake from the other board members, I think it's important to bring up that in the state of Nevada, I think we have a situation, and this kind of relates to what Hank mentioned, that the state of Nevada is 46th in participation in FSA programs. And I think it's important for people to understand maybe why that happens. I think Nevada has a history of being very independent, and I think there are a lot of operations that simply do not participate in federal programs, and it's a philosophical thing. It's not, not to make judgments in one way or the other, but it's just, that feeling is out there, it's real. And so, a lot of this, people aren't looking for more funding in order to get relief, for drought stuff. What I think a good number of people, a good number of family ranchers out there are looking for a relief to regulation and red tape of actually doing what's best for the resource, and with no politics and agendas, attached to it. So it's important for the other board members to understand that philosophy out there, and it's strictly within individual, what your own personal philosophy is, whether you not participate in programs, and I don't make a judgment one way or the other as to whether people do, but there's definitely a very significant contingent of family ranchers out there that feel they are best served by not being involved with a federal program. What they're looking for is relief and a solution to the regulatory program and problems.
You're right, Boyd, and we quit doing it because every time we did it, we found a way that we didn't qualify. So it was like, don't even bother. This is my second issue, Hank, I wanted to ask you about on the sage grouse. And some of you folks are going to have to help me out to know more about it, but aren't some of the things you brought up, Hank, are what is intended for the state to do to try to, what we talked about earlier with Ramona? Isn't that the idea of this committee, is to address some of those issues?
Here's the frustration, Chairman, for the record, Hank Vogler. We have been in sort of committee for 12 years compiling studies, and we know a great deal about the sage grouse. We have addressed nothing. And if you will look to some sister states like Montana and Wyoming and Idaho who have had to address the wolf issue, the state had to, whether they wanted to or not, to come up with a program and a plan, or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service presents their program and they become the program under their guidelines. But if the state comes up with a program and then massages it with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, there's a great deal more room for both sides of the issue to be aired, and it's a far more equitable situation. They now hunt wolves in Idaho and in Wyoming and in Montana, where before they couldn't. Maybe Montana hasn't got to jump through all the hoops. So the frustration as soon as that animal is about to go on that endangered species list, our time element doesn't appear to have much value to do one more study. We need to be developing hard, cold facts and a contingency of what to do, whether it's continue to hunt ravens or everybody's screaming habitat, 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 but as a boy when the skies used to turn black with sage grouse, there was a heck of a lot more sheep and a heck of a lot more cattle all throughout the Great Basin. As a side note, there's an animal called the prairie chicken that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was trying to get designated as an endangered species in the eastern Colorado, southern Nebraska, western Kansas area, which is almost entirely private land. It was squashed like a bug so fast it'd make your head spin. And the only difference, ironically, seems to be is there's no real federal controlling authority unless you start pushing on private land. And evidently even Fish and Wildlife Service, it appears, didn't have the stomach to jump in the middle of that much private land and start making demands of Kansans and Nebraskans and Coloradans that have deeds to their property. Whereas in Nevada, we have a gazillion times more sage grouse, and we're still being threatened that it somehow needs protected under the Endangered Species Act. So there's a pile of hypocrisy out there, too. We seem like the weakest link, and I believe that probably where Mr. Fallon was headed was to let you know that we'd sure like to have everybody on the same page that is involved in agriculture.
Thank you, Hank. Any questions or comment on Hank's report from the Grazing Committee? Yes, Mr. Barbie.
Tagging along with that, Hank is Jim Barbie for the record. Do you guys have the capability or the best way to get to, I'm looking for information relative to what ranchers, producers, the grazing committees that are doing activities that maybe are not even initially targeted at sage grouse but benefit sage grouse, to try to get to a number of dollar-wise of investment that agriculture is making that would benefit sage grouse statewide. Is that something that, I don't know, Rangeland Resource Commission, Central Committee, do you guys have suggestions?
Resource Concepts has a bunch of university studies over the years that they've compiled of the contribution to the state's economy and everything, and to the fact that the certain habitat things that can be done that improves it for the sage grouse as well as domestic livestock and other wildlife is a mountain of information. But again, if it's not incorporated, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service comes with their particular scheme, with their particular blinders on, unless we have all these things incorporated into our SageN plan. And you guys do you have a seat on that board, but you guys are on that committee, aren't you, Jim, or somebody?
No, we have a employee that is part of the technical team.
Okay, there you go.
That reports to the Sage Grouse Council, which is diverse in population, I guess.
Director Barbie, I think the most important theme of all is the monumental impact this can have on the rural counties and how short a time frame that we're dealing with, and the frustration after 12 years of study after study after study. And even though we know the biggest detriment is the raven, everybody says remove livestock. You know, where I'm at, they do their studies right there. I mean, there's people wandering around in the dark with these kind of telephone thing and collars on these sage chickens. Well, where I live, they've been running sheep right there for 150 years, and they want to remove the sheep. There must be a symbiotic relationship between the two animals because they've survived side by side, and maybe it has to do with nothing more than predator control. but we seem to be, we don't want to address the 800-pound gorilla. We want to point fingers at each other, and I just have to deal with a solution because the last 64 years I've been trying to accomplish something, and I don't want to see it go out of the window because of politics, and this is all this is politics. It has nothing to do with the sage grouse.
Mr. Chairman. Hang on just a second. Go ahead.
The ag representatives on the council are Steve Boyce for ranching, JJ Goguchia, who is, of course, from ranching, but represents local government, and Doug Busselman. And that's of looks like a 10 or 11 member board. Everybody else is government, wildlife, energy, mining, and so forth. So ag has a pretty small representation there, and yet it's ag that's going to be the most impacted with the exception of mining. Hank, is there any, on another note back to the Central Committee, is there any effort on the part of the Central Committee that you know of all the ranchers that got burned out as a result of this last round of fires, especially up in northern Nevada, to obtain range improvement funds for reseeding for something besides cheatgrass?
I think every effort that is possible is being made. It is policy, not law, not rule, not regulation. It is policy of the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service to have a minimum of 2 years rest, which may have been all right with native species, but with the cheatgrass, I personally participated in a program on private land where a GPS program was put together, and my herder kept the sheep on the private property. They went out there the following year after the fire, right in the ash, and they got so fat that several of my sheep prolapsed their rectums and absolutely were unbelievably fat. And to this day, you can see where the private land was in the checkerboard versus the public land. So there are other methods, and I don't know what if our governor, if our senators, our representatives who are going to continually have to ante up more protection from fires, or who has the magic bullet. The only reason we're still alive and surviving this sage grouse is the fact that the miners are lumped into this same equation. Or it's as though that somebody smells blood in the water, and it's the elimination of livestock grazing is the end run. As I already lived through the spotted owl of the Northwest, 2/3 of the people that are working in those mines came out of the woods in the Northwest after the spotted owl took them out. So that's what we're facing, and our charter and mandate is to help and support agriculture, and I believe it still has something to do with agriculture, public land grazing.
Director Barbie, would it be possible maybe for the department to send a letter? I know some of this is coming out of the Battle Mountain District. I've heard horror stories of that. I don't know what's going on up in the Santa Rosas in that grazing district. But they're just going in arbitrarily, issuing edicts and saying everybody out of the pool with regard to grazing. Meanwhile, horses are overrunning the range on the other end, and they don't, BLM, to my knowledge, doesn't own any water up there. So anyway, it might be worth the board or the department doing a little bit of a pushback and with regard to their policies.
The comment I would make is based on the letter that we got sent to the Secretary of Interior last, was it fall? Yeah. From him, yeah. I would suggest that you make a request to the governor's office to do a letter and push back, is how they wanted to, basically how they would like to see us bring them that kind of stuff, in which case I can deliver that message.
Okay.
So, but I would suggest that you put that in the form of a motion and what you want me to do.
Which we'll have to do at the next meeting.
Well,
Okay.
but I can convey the conversation,
Okay.
I think, correctly. And I would also suggest that if you want to engage, I agree with everything that Hank said, that, you know, we're in charge with protection, promotion of the agency, but we can only do so much as our authorities will allow us to do. I think you want to engage also the Sage Grouse Council that's meeting tomorrow. And I know that there's some that may feel, well, that's more bureaucracy, but that's part of the game. We have to engage the bureaucracy.
Well, and I think it goes back to a general problem that we have in this state. And I think Hank's alluding to it, Boyd was alluding to it with these issues. We have a problem in this state where we're run more like a colony than we are a state. And unfortunately, so much of the time, if the federal agencies say boo, we ask, or tell us to jump, we ask how high. And quite frankly, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, a lot of times when they say jump, they don't have the authority to say jump in the first place. And so, to the extent that the state, and we are a function of the agency of the state and so forth, and the governor can insist that the federal agencies follow their own laws, I think that we can do that very respectfully, but they need to follow their own laws. And that's where I differ with how we handle these issues. We're not asking them to give us deference or treat anybody here in a special manner. We just want them to follow their own laws. And we don't need to be acting like a colony.
You know, Ramona, you brought up the issue about Battle Mountain. And one thing that I've seen over the years is every part of the state's different. And we're seeing that now, especially in the drought.
Yeah.
Every permit is different. And I gotta be honest with you, when you talk about the federal government following their rules, we had our winter permit this year that they called for, you get 80% of your AUMs. We couldn't do 80%. We couldn't go out there and do the right job with our cattle, and we calved out there. We couldn't do it. They were absolutely nuts. We did 50% and still had to lighten the herd to get through so we can get to the end of the permit. A perfect example is what's going on in Fernley right now. Okay? Dallas should not have been allowed to run any of his cattle, and we live there. We'd own that permit if it was worth the darn, and it's not. They shouldn't have gone out there at all. They should have taken a year off. So each area is different, so when we start, we have to know we can't get involved in these individual things. We don't even know what the true issue is with that permit. And I can't speak to the sage grouse. And I just wanted to say the last thing on the sage grouse is this committee meeting tomorrow, I was told that this is exactly what Hank is talking about, while people need to be there so we can have a say and whatever, so we can intervene on what the federal government, so we have our own plan in the state of Nevada. So we don't have the tortoise thing where the federal government comes in and says, no, it's our way or the highway. So that's what I was told.
And I'm speaking to the law, that federal agencies often cannot do what they do without the state doing it for them. And now we're getting into broad generalizations, so I don't want to get off in the ditch. But to the extent that the state can certainly ask the questions as to the priorities of these federal agencies in their implementation of their management plans in general, and I'm not talking specific permits. I don't have a clue with regard to most of the outfits around the state of Nevada in terms of specifics, but I'm saying I'm hearing quite a lot out of the Battle Mountain District. I have a transcript of proceedings that I paid for out of the Battle Mountain District, and it was just that, everybody out of the pool with no kind of with no administrative remedy. And so, I think that these are areas that we need to, as a state and as a board, at least push back on in a general sense, to the extent that we can.
Boyd, you wanted to speak a little bit ago.
I'll refer back to Director Barbie's question. Were you asking if there was some value in gathering information on the the value of contribution to sage grouse habitat and sage grouse well-being by agriculture, or are you asking for the economic impact?
More of the direct dollar, and I'm coming from the angle of, I can see as the sage grouse groups start to circle and gel, well, what is your industry doing, committing, and I want to make sure, because I know that our industry commits quite a bit and has, like Hank stated, committed for 12 or more years specific to this issue, to have some kind of record of what that financial commitment has been and is on an annual basis and doesn't fall through the cracks and is not represented or recognized by the whole group. So in other words, there's been a coalition of getting the funding figured out for the bureaucracy side of things, but I'm talking more directly to monies that are applied to the ground that are like Hank's saying, are plan driven and actually doing something, whether that's Raven, whether that's habitat restoration, whether that's simple reclamation projects that you're doing on your own private ground or on BLM permit ground, that also at the same time benefits sage grouse in some way.
I can see where there would be a real benefit to having that kind of information to put out there. It might be a bit of a workload to try and list the number of things that are done and actually contribute not only to sage grouse, but in conjunction, that relationship with our livestock. Most things that we do to improve our livestock production most certainly improve sage grouse habitat.
Absolutely.
And that's on the way we use public lands or the way we use our private lands. But it would be an interesting to have someone put those things together, because I think it's a lot more expansive list than what we realize. Instead of saying what to contribute out of our pocket for sage grouse period, is probably pretty limited. But everything we do and the contribution we make and the changes in our management program that costs us dollars to implement all go toward the improvement of habitat, therefore sage grouse benefit.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. And I guess that was my original question, and so now tell me if that Hank's answer is correct or we need to look at it bigger. Would we get to that information through the grazing boards? Would we do a survey of Cattlemen's, Stockmen's Association? I'm looking for guidance on how we would get that information, because I think that that's something that's going to carry value as we move forward in this process.
I think it almost takes someone with an ag economist of some type to put together the things that we really, that we do on an everyday basis that has a value to it, to pinpoint that as being a contribution to sage grouse well-being. So it could be, I think if it's going to be done, it needs to be done in a detailed enough manner to show the true impact of what ranching as an industry does for sage grouse, or the livestock industry itself. And it's not in what you write toward the federal government or some other group, NGO, to work on, to contribute to sage grouse, but what do we do on a daily basis? And there's a lot of value in that.
Concur.
For the record, Director Barbie, I believe there's been 2 or 3 university studies commissioned, and I believe Resource Concepts, John McLean, has copies of those studies. Now, they may be slightly dated, so about all you'd have to do is add a few zeros for inflation and take away the noses that are gone, which is all attainable through property tax rolls or whatever, or BLM permits. A perfect example of this, when I started on the N4 Grazing Board, I completed Bert Parris's term in 1989. We had $176,000 was our share of the revenue generated by Bureau of Land Management. Today we are incorporated with N5, which includes what Ramona spoke of in Clark County and Lincoln County. They had their own program. Now the 2 N4 and N5 grazing boards together this year, with carryover money of about $10,000, we had $42,000 to spend, or to use as per charter for the grazing boards. So right there in one little tiny part of Nevada, not including Elko County, everybody's revenue is plummeted because of the removal of the livestock. A lot of that's been masked for the fact that we have $1,500 gold and $4 copper. I've been here since 1984, and I believe there's been 4 set-tos with the values of gold and minerals. But agriculture would like to continue, but we keep having to relent to wild horses, to elk, and now it looks like the sage grouse is going to have a tremendous impact. And we're not asking you to come out and carry signs on individual allotments for individual producers, but as a Department of Agriculture, possibly, again, like Ramona suggested, a policy letter with the information that we do contribute to our local economies and to the state's economy, which obviously 70% of the revenue stream of the state of Nevada comes out of Clark County, and so therefore we get to be the ugly redheaded stepkid pretty quick. But gambling is now legal in 46 states, and they have some huge casinos in other countries. So maybe the backbone has always been, as we have preached, has been agriculture for this state.
And just to make
Get a little preachy, so I'll quit.
But just to make a comment on your preaching, I think the ag study supports everything that you just said. We're looking at an industry statewide that's $5.3 billion, not 4.5, 5.3 per the study. Over 60,000 jobs directly connected to the agriculture industry statewide. And what we found is a codependency between the urban areas and the rural areas on the production side, urban areas on the processing side. Clark County alone represents half of that $5.3 billion presence from the standpoint of ag economic activity, not production, but driven by processing. And I think that what we've accomplished at the session, which is narrow and small, I think it has to be the citizenry, not the legislators that we inform, but right now that's who we have access to. We have to inform them of that codependency and how important that codependency is, and that the understanding that if sage grouse were to wipe out ag production in the rural areas, the urban areas are going to feel that. Those dollars, those economic activities, and I would suggest that AUM is greater than 100. That's kind of surprisingly low to me. I think it's much more than that. Because basically that economic impact that we're talking about is going to be $2.5 billion represented in the rural areas. I mean, that's something that the study has pulled out of there and supports everything that you just said. So, yeah, I mean, that's
for
part
the record,
of this.
Mr. Barbie, for the record, Mr. Barbie, Hank Vogler, that's what we would like to, if it's possible, to put such a letter together with the updated information. My information and statistics are like me; they're getting long and white-headed. So I'm sure that there is a bigger figure that can be put on this. And yes, I would say that the $100 of economic benefit per animal unit month is probably a low figure. But sometimes economists like to be more comfortable than flamboyant.
Is it $100 annually, or is it $100 a month per AUM?
A month.
No, annually.
Huh?
Annually.
No. It's an animal unit month. An AUM is one animal for 1 month. So if you had that animal on federal graze, like I do with my sheep most of the time, that would be $1,200 per cow, or $1,200 annually per 5 sheep.
I'm not sure that, I'm going to have to, I think we need to look that up, because I think the value of an AUM to the economy is $100 per year.
Yeah, AUM, animal unit month. So if you have a permit that allows you to run one cow for 5 months.
Okay, you're right. That's right.
We're gonna have to get our shoes off here and do some ciphering. I gotta run out of fingers. You got too many zeros on this money.
I'm sure Mr. Barbie will confirm that, because we don't want any bad math out there, or we'll really look stupid.
Okay, thank you. But $100 an AUM, if you had a 5-month permit, that would be $500 worth of economic benefit for that cow being out there for that 5-month period. So it's $100 animal unit month.
Got it.
And it could very well be a low figure. Again, it could be more dated than I like to think about. So.
Okay. Hey, thank you guys over there in Elko. If there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and move on. We're going to go ahead and open up for public comment one last time before we adjourn.
I'd just like to say, you've
For
got...
the record, ma'am, your name?
Susan Noble.
Thank you, Susan.
And so I listened to all this, and you're talking about demonizing the horses. You're talking about being demonized as cattle and livestock, reps. I think that you're also demonizing the horses, and you really should have someone that supports the horse industry on your board so you have a balanced look at things. Because I think you're missing the boat from the state, from revenue, from supporting the wild horses. Yes, you need to control the population, but right now, BLM has 51,000 in warehousing. They have their capacity at 52 or 53,000 is what they state. Their bill for this is $78 million last year. They cannot continue taking these horses off. And I know you're not doing the wild horses, you're doing the strays, but this whole idea of taking and warehousing these horses so that you can have more cattle, more elk, more whatever, and ignoring that piece of the economic pie, to me, is ridiculous. You should be balanced. It should be a balance so that you have the horse industry for revenue should come to the table also. That's fine.
Thank you. Do you have anything last minute? Okay, board, real quick. Charlie?
I have one thing. Can I give you a University of Nevada Cooperative Extension update?
Sure.
President Mark Johnson, who's the UNR president, is trying to combine CABNR, which is a College of Agriculture and Biotechnology, Natural Resources, and Cooperative Extension. They're trying to combine them together. They've been meeting with the counties, and Jeff Fontaine is head of NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties. And the majority of the Special Advisory Committee, well, all of them, voted unanimously to try to keep the two departments separated and not merged. And President Johnson wants to merge them. And they're going to be meeting with, President Johnson's going to be meeting with the county officials to try to explain his position. And we kind of think that it's going to be detrimental to Cooperative Extension, because Cooperative Extension has already been cut about 76% from their budget about 3 years ago. They provide a valuable resource to all agriculture, and they kind of work from the bottom up. The farmers contact Cooperative Extension, have a specific problem, they research it, the Cooperative Extension researches it, comes back with an answer. Well, President Johnson, I think, it ends up wanting to merge the two and bring some of those people that are working in the field and helping the stakeholders into the classroom. I believe they only have 4 or 5 people in the Department of Agriculture now, biotechnology excluded and natural resources excluded. But it is really important to agriculture that we as farmers, as producers, can get advice from Cooperative Extension on specific problems we're having, no matter what it is. 1 year you know, we'll have a totally different problem than the next year, but, we, as all the advisory committees members for the entire state, I think it's really a bad idea to combine those two agencies, because one teaches students, the other one advises stakeholders or farmers. And so if you're gonna go to your county commissioner meetings, voice your opinion if you think that it would help. But they've been a really big help to us, and TEF is one. They're growing hops and Fallon, which is another one. And then, of course, the viticulture industry, trying to start it, a huge benefit to us. And we're afraid we're going to lose that. So if you can, I think President Johnson's going to be at Churchill County's commission meeting early part of next month, 8th or 5th or 8th, I believe.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Good. Yes, Ramona?
Would it be advisable to ask him to come speak to the board?
Is that President? Could. I think I want to research the politics of that a little more too, on where it's driving.
You and our grads?
Right.
When I walked away from the greetings at the FFA convention, I think the man wants to listen.
Was he there that day?
He was there that day and he spoke and he talked about the 4-H program leaving Humboldt County, and one of the FFA students pleaded with him and they were able to save it. So it may have been, that's why I want to listen, we want to listen to him, Charlie. Yeah. He may have a motive that he has no choice like we did with bringing in this new agency to keep us alive. He may be doing the same to try to keep those 4-H programs alive.
And one comment that I would just add, I'll take my hat off, I report to you guys, I do what you say, but I do have an opinion on that item. And I agree with everything that you say and just said, and believe they should merge the two because of it.
To save it.
To save it. Not only to save it, but to redirect. Like in Fallon, they're directly connected, and it's an example where it's working, but I'm not sure that that's statewide. The largest activity as you move south in the state, especially in the urban areas, there isn't much of a connection by cooperative extension to agriculture. And I think that's directly because of that separation. Every state I've been involved in prior to coming to Nevada and then after Nevada has had a university, which is the norm, where the College of Agriculture and the extension programs are connected and have a common mission. They go at it differently, just like you said, advising directly to the community and supporting agriculture, not necessarily being in the classroom. I agree with that as well. But they have a consolidated mission in supporting agriculture. I think in some cases, cooperative extension has become separated from the ideologies and mission of agriculture. I think in Douglas, there's some examples of that. As you move way south, there's usually, I mean, one of the biggest activities that those guys are doing down there are promoting nutritional programs that are, you know, funding them through federal grants, through federal programs, and are not really connected through production agriculture at all. And I think there's got to be a production agriculture connection. So there's a lot of debate on both sides there.
We did debate a lot of that in our meetings, and if you go back in history when John McCormick was head of cooperative extension and running the university farms, University of Nevada was doing a lot more research, a lot back then than they are now.
Because those farms are separated.
Well, they were together. Then they separated, then they went back together, and now they separated, I think, in 1999. Our concern is because we have a problem as producers and not being able to get the information quickly enough. And they're all out, the university side, Cadner's all out trying to get grants. And I mean, that's about all they do, is they try to get funding for the university without helping the producers out in the state. And if you go back into the 40s and 50s, when John McCormick was around working with my dad, they would do a lot of in-field research, like on the soils, and trying to make the soils more productive and get rid of the alkali and whatever it might be. But you don't see that as much because cooperative extension doesn't have the funding, and they've been cut really a lot. So you may be right.
No,
and
but
we
that's
are
where I
gonna
agree
maybe-
with everything you're saying and see the difference I see the way that we fix that is by making them be together and focus on agriculture. But I can agree with everything that you're saying more.
But their method of operation and their purpose is kind of different, because one is a teaching agency, teaching students, the other one is advising the producers. And that's where our special advisory committee, and they voted on it, and they said they'd like to leave it alone and not combine it.
But that should be the same information.
And well,
what you're teaching the students should be what's best for the industry and what they're advising you guys to do. And that farm
right.
ought to be driving that research directly to what you need as a producer in terms of research and those kind of things. And that's where, in my mind, that disconnect is weak in the whole procedure.
Well,
I mean, when they separated back in the 80s, that's when we lost the College of Agriculture, or the, some ways, yeah. But that's where we lost the agriculture education program. And that's why I had to go to another state to go to school.
They're losing a lot of, like, the 4-H projects,
Right, exactly.
FFA, and all kinds of stuff. But the funding's been cut. And the state legislature has basically given the university the funding, and then the president provides or oversees the budgetary process, including cooperative extension, and he's been pulling money away, much more money away from that agency than any of his teaching, his academic sections. And we have no problem with either side. I mean, I honestly believe that there should be both sides, but you don't mix two fine wines together to make an exceptional wine that doesn't work. And that's where we kind of have laid our hats, the committee. It's a large committee, advisory committee.
Is that the College of Ag Advisory Committee
I'm
or
sorry?
the Cooperative Extension Advisory Committee?
It's the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension Advisory Committee for the state of Nevada. And we meet down in Vegas.
And the College of Ag has one, and they've also, I think, made a stand to support the combining.
Yeah.
So I'm saying if we do that, because there is a split in agriculture, as you can tell, we probably want to have both sides comment.
You know, the end result you want, the end result that I want is exactly the same.
I agree.
But the method to get there, we're afraid that all the funding and even the researchers, the people in the field, are going to be pulled up because the University of Nevada has been cut so much that they're going to start taking people like Jay Davison out of the field and putting them in an ag room for 2 or 3 days a week, maybe more. And that's our main concern from the stakeholder standpoint. So you and I are exactly on the same page, but in opposite directions of how to get there.
And I'm looking at that. If that was the worst case that happened, then there's better instruction that's happening to the students that are going to eventually. Anyway, I agree.
Yes, Alan, you got a little milk plant?
I thought I'd give you a little update here, 2-minute blurb. You know what, the milk plant's powder plant's going up. If you've driven by there at all, there's about 6 silos in the air, they're 92 feet
The
tall.
Navy jets have to do a steeper angle when they leave the base.
Yeah.
Yeah, big ones.
You know, they hold 70,000 gallons apiece. The dryer is being put together and will be placed on top of the concrete walls that are being put up, and so it's moving forward. They're still looking at November 1st as a starting date, but that's what DFA is looking for. I talked to the contractor guy, and he goes, well, we're doing the best we can. So I know a lot of things are happening, I think a lot's gonna happen after the building structure gets up, I should say. Lot to go still.
I just want to point out that I just always have a horrible time. What a horrible thing to do to good old glass of milk is turn it into powder. Because I remember my mom trying to feed me that stuff, and I don't know why, to this day, why we had powdered milk. Maybe because we didn't want to run to town.
Well, I got back.
Put on a bowl of cereal.
Talk about this global market available to us, and I tell you what, I got back from Kansas City last week, and we're just barely touching less than 5%, and the markets, the population is growing faster than the market can grow, and
you know what would be the equivalent to that as a beef guy? Is taking a good old beautiful 1,200 pound choice steer and making him into jerky. Oh, go ahead, Judge.
They serve
well, the shelf life definitely extended. Right?
So, if Mr. Frey were to agree to host our next meeting in June, then that might be a possible tour that we could do at the same time.
We could see the milk.
At least go by and see it. I don't know.
Right, but
I'm
I
not
can
even
see
allowed
the
to go
facility
on
coming up.
premises right now, but at some point we hope to. But,
Be a good picture opportunity for them and us.
Absolutely. They're putting a lot of concrete and a lot of stainless up in the air, that's for sure. So
cool.
And then also I'd like to comment that Governor's Breakfast, I thought that went very well. Jim, you did a great job in your speech there, and that was.
Wasn't ready for the question part.
That was very good. And I heard that the Ag Day was phenomenal. We had a dairy convention the same time at the Nugget, that 3-day convention that happens every 2 years, so wasn't able to go to that, but we heard it went off really well, so thank you, appreciate the efforts.
You betcha. Any last minute thoughts under public input? Just throwing it out there, how's the 11th of June sound? It's a Tuesday?
Sounds good to me.
The vice president says that will be the day. Or the vice chairman, I'm sorry.
What's
Yes, ma'am.
Mark, Amati, I think it is.
Amadei.
He is pushing to get the federal lands in Nevada under state control. How is that going to impact you guys?
Well, there's a little bit more to that statement. You need to read it a little bit more.
Well, I just sort of blew up on TV.
They want to do whole research to see how to work equitable, all of that stuff. That's the main thing first.
That's just a huge amount of workload, and along with assets, liabilities.
We're one of the few states that don't own our state, so that's probably doable.
Yes. Okay.
Could we game for Fallon, or?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we need to go to Elko this year.
How do you guys in Elko sound if we did Fallon for the next meeting, which is June, and if we did Elko for the August meeting, and then we maybe did Vegas for the December meeting? Because it's been quite some time since the board's turned around, and we'll try to put some ag tours together with those meetings.
I think it'd be a good deal to get out of Sparks. I think it's been a fiscal concern that we didn't, that we were trying to save money by not going around the state in the most recent history, I think. But I think it would be good for the department and board and for the community to have those into the rural areas.
I was thinking Loggy's Junction would be a great place.
Where?
Loggy's Junction.
Just south of Curry.
Just south of Curry. Where in the world have you guys been? You've never been anywhere, have you?
Evidently not.
Is that by Duckwater?
Just north of Shelburne. What's the matter? How about Tippett? How about Ivapaw?
If you got a bunch of
Anywhere's
deer
fine.
headlights going on down here.
We gotta have something bigger than an 8x11 to meet in.
Oh, well, why didn't you say that?
Charlie, did you have something on the June meeting you wanted to say? Or you just
No,
good
we
with-
have plenty of chairs. The only thing, I'll round up some, conference tables and we should be set.
And I'll coordinate with you, we won't be working.
We might.
We'll have staff.
And you're okay, it's a public meeting, so there could be people from,
You bet.
We have wine tasters.
Well, we don't wanna advertise that.
Public will really show up then.
okay.
After 5.
What's that?
Maybe you're off agenda.
With that in mind, let's get back on to agenda number 9, right, Dennis?
Yes.
Pretty hard to mess this one up.
I move.
I second.
Motion been made, seconded, Mr. Frey made it, Mr. Perazzo seconded, all in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned. Subject to call of the chair.
It is 2 o'clock, straight up.
You were fast.
Winter chicken dinner.
I didn't even get it out.